Okay, welcome back from the lunch break. It's 1:05 as planned, and so we'll move on to our next department budget summary and give the floor over to Stephen.
So next budget unit is Public Safety Facilities, Budget Unit 1785, found on page D49. And their requested appropriations equal $6,335,156. And I'll turn it over to the sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Board, for your time today. All the thank yous that are set to go out there. I have 21 budget units, so I'm going to try to be concise and be respectful of everybody's time and make sure there's enough time for the other departments to be heard. But I do want to take some time to thank Mary Beth Strong, my finance manager, and Nancy McCarrick, who was here earlier this morning, for all their hard work, as well as the staff from the county admin office, Stephen Carter, the auditor's office. There's a lot of moving parts that go in. And I know you hear it from all department heads, the thank yous that go out, but it's truly a work of art that gets us to here, and there's a lot of moving parts that I'm grateful for. With Budget Unit 1785 to start us off is our public safety facilities. There's some information here that the Public Services Director is going to want to chime in with, and Lars, you'll be joining us at the table. We have three major projects that are currently underway under 1785. The first major project is a generator project for the jail, and there's going to be some a request for some additional funding that wasn't available in the budget, and due to some estimates that we got back from our bid process, and I'll leave that to Lars to explain.
Well, thank you. So the jail generator project currently appropriated from previous fiscal years, and what is shown in the budget book is $525,000. We have thus far we actually purchased the generator. It's en route. That's $172,000, and just about 2 weeks ago we opened bids for the construction portion of it, which includes both materials and labor. And the low bid appears to be $507,000, factoring in some soft costs for construction management, gets to a total project cost of $704,000. Again, the appropriations are $525,000, which leaves a shortfall of $179,000. So what we are requesting, and is not included in your budget, as I don't think it is in the budget book, is a request for $225,000, which covers the shortfall of $179,000 plus a 25% contingency.
And this is within Fund 960, our budget unit 1785?
1785, correct.
And I see the look on at least one supervisor's face, like, how is it so much? If you could talk about the other bids that came in.
Absolutely, yeah. And I waited for questions to that end, but we received 4 bids, and coming to the board for a recommendation for award is forthcoming. We received 4 bids. One was non-responsive to the extent that they failed to actually include their bid. But the other 3 were all within about, I want to say it was 10 to 15%. So it's not as though they were all over the board. So when we have a number of bids, even though 3 is not extremely high number, it still indicates that that we're in a good range for the design. So the design was sufficient so that a good bid process could occur. So that why the extreme costs? To be perfectly blunt, it's the labor market and the material costs. A couple of years ago, we had a cost estimate of about $525,000 for the whole project, and here we are now with that additional cost.
That was my question. Of when was the project originally contemplated? It was a few years ago.
It was a few years ago. It was, yeah.
And the reality of what's going on with that.
Absolutely. And to that point, the generator alone, we ordered it in March. It's still being fabricated, or in line to be fabricated. So we're still a little ways out from actually receiving that. So it's not fun to go up here and tell you we need more money for a project that exceeds our cost estimate, but that's the reality of the situation.
So then where's it's $250,000?
$225.
Oh, $225.
So I will tell you the nuts and bolts on how that would happen, because that's probably what you would have to approve. So for Budget Unit 1785, we would have to increase 8122, which is operating transfer in of 525,000, and we would have to increase account 6313, which is construction in progress where it is, increase it by 525,000, and it would actually come out of Budget Unit 1120. It has to be general fund. So when we get to 1120, I'll ask for 8123, which is operating transfer out, to increase by 525,000. And where is the extra revenue coming from? Well, after the budget was submitted and finalized, our fund balance available actually has 2.5 million extra, because Teeter was transferred into the general fund first week of September? First week of September into June 30th. So that wasn't even in these numbers. That's what would cover.
When were you going to say that?
Well,
When you got to the sheriff's budgets.
$2.5 million, we'll cover that plus some parks projects.
the reason I haven't talked about it is unfortunately, there's multiple items that are going to eat it up quickly.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, exactly. I figured as soon as we got there.
Two
Are
other,
we gone before we get there? Is that what you said?
two other significant projects out of 1785 are the tower and control remodel. The tower and control system is basically the control center for the jail operating facility. It's the location where all the doors are opened and closed from. It's an antiquated system. I believe it's original to the facility, and the equipment that was in there is proprietary, and the company that designed and built that equipment no longer exists. We're experiencing some failures in the system now, and so the next significant project is that remodel of the project. We're at the stage now where we're having a potential bidder walkthrough schedule for later this week, and hoping to get bids back very soon on that.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
So the way the tower now requires multiple staff to be in there to operate it?
We have two different control rooms.
Okay.
So, yes, it's a post that cannot be vacated at any time. It's been staffed continuously since the jail was constructed. That room has never been empty. It can't be empty. We typically have one person assigned to it when our staffing levels are up to where they should be. We can have two people assigned so somebody can have some relief in those rooms.
Okay.
And the last, probably the largest project that we have is, of course, the former armory facility that is going to be converted to the sheriff's. I believe they refer to it as the sheriff's complex, building complex, in the opening presentation. Public Services has put out a request for bids. We had, I believe, 7 responses from architecture firms for the design, and the selection committee is meeting next week to select an architecture firm for that.
Just for some clarity on that, it's for the initial kind of programming. It's not the full design that we're looking at, but there's the distinct possibility that the same firm that does that, if they do satisfactorily, then we would continue with them. But yeah, just wanted to make sure it's not for the entirety of the design, nor is it obviously the construction. We're talking about the preliminary stages.
And that's all I have for 1785.
Go ahead, Supervisor Socrates.
I don't want to say it, but I'm still going to ask. Does that tower remodel require them to have ADA access, since it's a remodel?
It's really an electronics upgrade. We're not talking about a physical remodel of the facility. So I will just confirm that, because it's a wise consideration. But since we're not modifying in any of the structure, my gut tells me no, because it's primarily electronics. But I'll look at that.
Okay.
How does that work with the downtime of the remodel and changing out all the equipment
Careful.
carefully?
Yeah. There's probably going to be some manual, I'm sure there's going to be at some point in time where we're going to have to open and close doors manually. So good old fashioned lock and key. So it's, hopefully it'll be a rather quick project. We went through a smaller scale project in another part of the facility where we converted over to touchscreens, and it had fairly minimal impact on our operations. Next budget unit is 2201.
I have one quick question. The last part for the sheriff complex, which doesn't sound like you made the name, does that just cover the design, the amount that's been dedicated to that, or does it does it cover more than just the design?
I expect it will cover much more than the design, but until we know what the scope of the project is, we conceptually, have some notion of what it'll look like, but that preliminary design will help to get us where we can say plus or minus 30%. Here's what we know about the project. The further we go on design, that plus or minus goes down to 15, goes down to 10, goes down to 5. So at this stage, I would argue that no, we don't have enough in that budget or another one, I believe, to fund the entirety of the project. So I'll leave my comments there.
Mainly, I wanted to make sure that, because the design needs to happen first, I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't the entirety just for the design, because that would have been really expensive too.
Yeah, we definitely scrutinize that.
Yes.
Design costs.
Absolutely.
So before we leave 1785, Kathy brought up that I actually said 525, the whole budget amount. The actual new amount is 225,000. Sorry, so I want to make sure that is.
Because that's the
stated properly.
addition to what was.
The addition on 225, so the 8122 would go up by 225,000. 6313 would also go up by 225,000. Sorry about that.
Hold up.
Unless there's any more questions.
New total of 750,000.
Anything else from the board on 1785?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you, Lars, I appreciate your
Thank
help.
you.
Thank you. Next budget unit is Budget 2201, Sheriff Coroner. This is the budget that handles the majority of our visible operations, our patrol functions, our investigative functions, our deputy coroner and coroner functions. As far as vacancies in this unit, we currently have a total of 42 deputies assigned to it with 10 vacant positions. We're still working on our efforts, along with the board's assistance in trying our recruitment efforts to try to get operations up to speed in there. Some of the other projects that we've been working on, I mentioned in the earlier, the opening presentation, the GVRP position that was funded at 75%. GVRP stands for Gun Violence Reduction Program. We applied for a State Department of Justice grant, which funds 3/4 of a detective, as well as some equipment. The duties of that detective are to identify people that are on the armed and prohibited persons list within California that we believe to have firearms, and take steps to get those firearms off the street. We've applied for another grant, a subsequent grant. We were in the first round of awardees for that particular grant, and a second round has come up. In our second round of grant applications, we're going to ask for the other 25% of that position to be funded. And we're also asking for some additional funding to form a task force with the, in concept with the probation department contributing an officer, and then also working with the local police departments on a part-time basis to have operations to target people that are illegally in possession of firearms in the county. We also participate in the Roadmap Task Force. Previous presentation was with the Community Development Department. We're participating to the extent that we can with that. Again, some of our staffing issues that we discussed at last week's board meeting are causing us to have to take a look at that. I want to continue with that program as much as possible. We also have some positions allocated. I believe that the grant may be ending for the school resource officers, but we haven't been able to staff those due to a lack of staffing availability for those positions. We're going to continue our recruiting effort. We have a very young workforce. We have some people that do have quite a bit of experience, but in the middle of the night, the workforce that you have at the sheriff's office is fairly young and inexperienced. So we're really going to work on some in-house training, get them all up to speed and at a level that they need to be working in Lake County, and provide services all hours of the day. Any questions on that?
I have a question for you. I know you've been installing some of those cameras that read license plates and all. Just kind of curious what's been efficacy for that and how that has helped in your department. I know that it's the force multiplier is what I keep hearing being used when it comes to law enforcement. How's that working for you, and do you need more?
Tremendous. Yeah, they're excellent. Matter of fact, I've submitted one of our success stories to the manufacturer who's working with our media team to put out a story on a particular investigation that we had. I'll share it here. It's not a big secret. We worked with the Highway Patrol on a hit-and-run fatality, and we were able to identify the driver through our camera system within a couple of hours based on debris found at the scene. Had we not had that, it likely would have been, if it would have been solved, best case scenario, maybe months, and more likely than not, that's a crime that would have gone completely unsolved. So they were able to identify what type of car did this based on the debris left at the scene, and we had a deputy go through and research the records, and he was able to identify a car of the same description coming into the county with no damage on its vehicle, and 30 minutes later passing another camera with damage on its vehicle. We've had several other capers where we've solved some burglaries. One of the more notable ones was a burglary where somebody left we knew that the house was burglarized between 3 and 5 in the morning, and somebody left a hot dog wrapper, and the deputy was able to he suspected that the only place that was open at 3 and 5 in the morning was a 24-hour store located nearby, so we went back and he checked the camera system, was able to develop information, and finally identify the suspect who had gone to get a hot dog before he burglarized this residence. Took the information, executed a search warrant, and cleared up multiple burglaries that occurred both in the county and within one of our cities. So a very effective system. It's probably brought some peace, at least to well, I'd say especially to the family of the young lady who was killed by the hit-and-run driver, that quite frankly, I don't know that would have been solved without the system. So that's a long answer for, yeah, I could use some more. They're very effective, yes.
Because, and granted, it's not necessarily this specific budget item, but I know cannabis taxes, we have a lot allocated for law enforcement. I'm not seeing it being used, other than we did use maybe about $2 million for salary coverage for all of the departments. I just want to make sure and repeat, there's money available if we can force multiply with more of that type of equipment in our community, and you say it's that helpful. Just want to make sure that I state that.
We've started tracking our successes as well as, I don't want to call them failures, but sometimes we'll use the system and it may not result in us finding something. So we've started having our deputies track when they use that system, because we know the question's going to come up, well, like how often? The anecdotal stories are nice, but we're hopeful that we'll develop enough empirical data where we can bring forth and show somebody with a degree of certainty exactly how much we're getting to use them. But I will tell you that it's like having extra sets of eyes out there, which is exactly what it is. So far, we've had no complaints. There's an audit system that's in place to make sure people are using it properly, and we've had no complaints, no allegations of any misuse of the system. And I know that's a concern for people, a concern with privacy rights. But I assure you that if we do get any complaints, we'll look into it. There's a very robust auditing system that's available with it. And the fact of the matter is that the 24 or so cameras that we have are nothing. There's probably more than 24 cameras in this building. So
Right. Thank you.
Well, not to mention, you have access to the 19 in my district as
Yes.
well. And it's solely your department. Code enforcement has, I think I need to work with them on it, but it's just you two, and then, yeah.
yes, it's an effective tool.
And that is continually budgeted through, unfunded through cannabis. So if there's more wished, we can make it happen.
All right.
Okay. Next budget unit is 2202, the Sheriff Central Dispatch. As you all know, the primary public safety answering point, or 911 center, is operated by the Sheriff's Office within the county, staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. On average, we handle, just the Sheriff's Office handles 36,000 calls, more or less, per year, which comes out to about 100 calls of service every day just for the deputy sheriffs. We also provide deputy dispatch services for the city of Lakeport, and then on an as-needed basis for several of our partner agencies, the BLM, Forest Service, and some other agencies within the county as it's needed. Currently, our dispatch vacancy rate is, we have 5 vacant positions with 11 allocated there. We have a dispatcher that's on training right now. We had a dispatcher up until a couple months ago that was doing very well in her training, who unexpectedly had to resign employment. And again, I want to thank the board for your efforts in helping me retain the people that we do have. The staff that's up there is very, very competent, very diligent. Many of them have joined us through the various wildfire events that we've had over the years. And I can't thank them enough for the work that they do under some pretty difficult circumstances. We augment the staffing up there right now with deputy sheriffs, as your board is aware from last week's discussion. And our hope is to get our staffing levels up in the dispatch center to where we can get the deputies back out either on the streets or in investigations where they can do what their primary mission would be. Anything on 2206? Yes.
Just a quick question, since you mentioned Lakeport, I had forgotten about that. Is there any compensation that comes along with that?
Yes, we have a contract with them for services, and that is in the amount. That's why I brought her with me.
And when was the last time that we reviewed that contract?
When? Every year. We review it every year. $174,000. Anything else? Next budget unit, 22. I'm sorry.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Or just a curiosity question. In central dispatch, across the country, obviously, I think we're experiencing that all the way across the board in law enforcement and central dispatch. Is there any technology advances in 911, that type of stuff? Because I know you give us the data on how many calls come in, but some of those calls are, someone made, my garbage can made, some of them are, some of them are very interesting, is what I will say. I know you guys probably take some of those. Is there, I just ask on technology for that.
So the number I gave you isn't the number of phone calls that come into the center, that's the number of actual incidents that
Okay.
we get dispatched to. And so those range from anywhere from a 911 misdial, somebody's got it in their pocket dial for 911 that doesn't require any response, all the way up to our most serious crimes. I don't have the number of actual phone calls that come in, but I think it's well in excess of 500,000 phone calls that come in every day. As far as technology, some of the technology that we've implemented over the years are, we have GPS units installed in our vehicles, which display the location of the patrol vehicles on the computer within the dispatch center. And that gives them the ability to dispatch the closest unit rather than asking around trying to find out who's the closest person. So that'll decrease our response time a little bit. We have the ability with what's called Next Generation 911 to receive text messages over the 911 system and respond to those. That's been several years in the making. It was just recently implemented because not all the local regional areas, some of those calls that we get need to be transferred out either to CHP or to CAL FIRE dispatch, and we had to wait for those entities to get up to speed where they could start accepting those text 911 transfers. So there have been some technological advances. I think those are probably two of the biggest ones as far as increasing our ability to deliver those services.
Okay, just had that question. Thank you.
Thank you. 2203, Sheriff Marijuana Suppression. This is money that comes from the DEA from the DSEP program, which is Domestic Cannabis Eradication and Suppression Program. We use this for illegal marijuana cultivation. This funds a lot of the overtime that we have when we send our deputies out to eradicate illegal marijuana growing operations. The funding is not allowed to be used for any license or regulatory activities. And when the DEA decides whether or not they're going to hand out money, we don't know how long this is going to continue, this source of funding. It's been talked about that this might not be around for the very far future, but we've been very successful, especially compared to some of our other sheriff's departments in the region in getting our money. Last year, I think it was $185,000. This year, I think we had or 150,000 last year. This year we got 215,000. So the DEA looks at what's going on in the particular jurisdictions when they decide how much to award, and they see that Lake County is fairly active in going after these illegal marijuana grows.
So, do you have data on how many grows have you worked on, illegal grows or mitigated or?
I have it. I don't have it with me today. I can get it to you. I will answer that question for you.
Thanks.
And they're pretty accurate down to the number of plants
The
that they
number of
pull.
plants.
They track them very diligently, so.
And you probably heard earlier what I was talking about with the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee with RCRC. Counties that I was talking with, of course, they all have the same issues, especially the counties that don't even allow the cannabis permitted, and it's all illicit grows, their issues, so more to come later.
Yeah, it's, the tactics have really changed since legalization. We don't have the grows that are way out in the national forest nearly as much as we used to. They're almost all within our communities and much closer. Quite frankly, the penalties for getting caught are not very burdensome for people.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. Budget Unit 2204, Sheriff Court Security. Of course, one of the tasks of the sheriff is to provide bailiff services, court security in the courthouses. This budget unit provides funding for that service. The unit is staffed with a combination of a permanent full-time sergeant supervisor, a couple of full-time deputies, and we're augmented by extra help retired annuitants in this unit.
I don't see any, oh, there we go, we got one.
For some reason, it's not popping up. Just a quick question. There's a huge increase both in revenue and expenditure. Just kind of curious if that's, there's reasons behind that.
Classic homestead, it's fully funded through court security.
I'm just going to repeat what she tells me. That's largely a result of the implementation of the class and comp study, and it's funded through court security sources.
So basically, this is state funds that comes through your department that eventually gets used for the security. Gotcha.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. 2205, Sheriff Marine Patrol. The money that comes into this budget is through the Department of Boating and Waterways grant. It provides for our Marine Patrol services out on the lake. It's staffed year-round by a full-time sergeant, and he is augmented with extra help retired annuitant deputy sheriffs during the summer months, a little bit before Memorial Day and then a little bit after Labor Day. The Boat Patrol actually cut back quite a bit on their staffing this year due to the lake levels being so low and a lack of activity on the lake. But this unit also enforces the county's quagga mussel and invasive species ordinance.
That's who I was about to.
So you've always, well, always, typically you've had two positions there and one was unfunded and now it became funded. Are you actively pursuing to fill that position or depending on the status of the lake and things like that and the need?
We use the funding from one equivalent full-time employee to divvy up amongst the retired annuitants during the busy season.
Okay. And very much appreciated, especially around the 4th of July where you're going to get large quantities of people on the lake and
They get called out at all hours, all year round for different things. Sometimes it's, well, when we get some big storm events, it'll be boats that get knocked loose from the docks or debris that gets washed out there in the middle of the lake. So they try to be helpful with getting that stuff out of there so we don't have accidents. Anything else on that? 2206, Sheriff, Rural and Small Counties. This budget unit receives funding through, I can't remember, AB 443, which the state set up to allocate funding to rural sheriffs, which Lake County is one of, in the amount of $500,000 annually to help with law enforcement services in our rural communities. We've been, over the last couple years, in anticipation of getting the Armory project, and I was just notified today by the CAO that is finally done, like the ink is dry, finally. So we've known for years that this was coming up and this was going to be a pretty hefty project, so we've been kind of squirreling money out of the rural sheriff's fund to help offset some of the costs for that. So that will hopefully help with that project.
When was that $500,000 number set? Is it a long time ago, or is it?
I don't think so. At least 15 years, my finance manager tells me, long before I got here.
With inflation, maybe they need to review.
They should.
what I'm
We should talk to our state legislature about that. Budget Unit 2207, Sheriff's Civil. Another function of the Sheriff's Office is to serve process of the court. We have a civil division that's staffed with a full-time deputy sheriff, as well as a full-time law enforcement records technician. We recently purchased a new software program, a civil management software program, as the old system was a proprietary system, and the owner of the system retired, making it unusable. So I think we have some expenditures from last year out of that to fund that Teleosoft software. We bought that last year, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And any questions on that?
No questions.
Sheriff Blood Alcohol, 2208. Sheriff's Office is required to pay for blood, breath, or urine analysis testing for DUIs in the unincorporated areas of Lake County, regardless of whether or not it's the sheriff's office or not that makes the arrest. And this is the funding that pays for those testings.
Quick question.
Yes.
Is it limited to only testing upon arrest, or is it possible to use that for like DUI checkpoints?
It's just simply for the testing, for the blood alcohol testing, for the lab fees. Budget Unit 2210, Sheriff STC. Per state law and BSCC regulations, every correctional deputy sheriff corrections is required to undergo basic core academy training within the first year. And upon promotion, they're required to complete a supervisory course within 1 year. The deputy sheriff corrections also have an ongoing training mandate through the state where they're required to do continuing professional training. This fund pays for that training, and we seek reimbursement from the state when that training is in fact reimbursable.
Next.
Budget Unit 2212, Sheriff Automated Warrants. This is a fund that's set up that was, I'm not sure the exact source of the funding, but it was carved out to be used for a countywide automated warrant system. It sat largely unused for many, many years. Just this past year, we used some funding to set up an interface with the courts where we can track warrants directly with the courts over the computer system, rather than the old system of actually having to hand print out the warrants, walk them over to the sheriff's department, put them in a file cabinet. It's a system that's accessible to all the law enforcement agencies within the county, and I was glad that we were able to finally find an appropriate use to spend this funding on for something that's actually going to be helpful and beneficial for the deputies on the street. Any questions on that?
I don't see any.
2213, the Sheriff's DNA Fund. This is a result of Prop 16.9. It's a fund that's set up to store, analyze, and test DNA evidence. We've used it on a couple of cases over the years. I think our most notable case recently was the solving of a cold case homicide using familial genealogy DNA testing on some remains that were found back in the 1970s. We were able to finally positively identify this person and return the remains to their family after he'd gone missing since, I think it was 1974 or 76. Any questions on that?
I don't see any.
2214 is Sheriff Asset Forfeiture. This is the fund that holds our asset forfeiture money when we encounter people that are engaged in criminal activity and have a suspicion that the criminal activity has resulted in some sort of monetary gain, whether it's direct cash or whether it's tangible goods. We initiate a separate civil proceeding that's separate and apart from any criminal investigation to ask the courts to require them to forfeit monies. This is done under both an agreement with the state and the federal government for equitable sharing. When those types of things occur, by statute, any money that is seized is divided amongst the seizing agency as well as the district attorney's office and used for for particular purposes. One interesting thing, a project that I'm working on that will eventually be brought to the board, is some of this money is supposed to be carved out to be used for youth gang prevention programs. We've never done that in this county. We've never expended any of that money, so it's just sitting there waiting to be used. My newly hired sheriff's assistant previously served for 7 different sheriffs in Sonoma County, and one of the tasks that she did when she was working down there was she organized the committee that was responsible for getting these funds out into the community to be used for their intended purposes. So that'll be something that I intend to bring to the board soon. If we can get some of this money out of that we've taken from people that are involved in illegal activity and get it into some programs that are going to be good for the youth in our county.
What's the balance of that account?
712,000.
That's the,
Well, it's a carryover, so it seems like it's a
okay.
balance.
Yeah.
okay.
And that was going to be my question is, not that I'm trying to compare you to the district attorney's asset forfeiture, but they have a reserve. Is there a reason why you don't put anything in reserve?
I don't know why they have a reserve.
I would suspect it's the same thing as you, where you've collected slowly. I don't think you collected in 1 year the 721,000, but it's not in a reserve versus just kind of floating and carry over from year to year.
I can't answer the questions on theirs, and it might be that their reserve is that carve out and that set aside for that gang reduction program.
Okay. I'm disappointed that you're expecting 0 this year.
I'm not expecting 0 this year. We say 0 because we don't know, but I'm confident we'll find some. Budget Unit 2215, the Sheriff Inmate Welfare Fund. The monies that are the revenue source for this is commissions off of phone calls, commissions off of commissary sales. The money goes right back to the inmates to provide for their educational or recreational opportunities. It initially funds some of those very same phone service programs to get the equipment installed. It also pays for a program officer whose job at the jail is to make sure that these programs that we have in place are made available to the inmates. The programs include the education program, the GED program, some of the substance abuse programs, anger management, and occasionally we'll have some vocational training programs as well. I think a discussion came up with somebody regarding the food service contract that's going to be coming up and whether or not there's any opportunities there. And we have had a successful food safety service. And I know I'm messing up the wording on that, but basically the certification program that you need to be able to work in a food service industry that we provided for some of our,
Yeah, the
Safe
Serve
Serve,
Safe
yeah.
program.
yes.
I was actually gonna ask if that money could be used for whatever portion with Trinity. I think we're moving to Trinity, right?
We're moving to,
We're moving from
Summit.
Trinity to Summit.
yes.
Just was curious if somebody goes through that program, since it's an educational, vocational thing, if the inmate welfare could maybe cover a portion.
Yes, I could. Yeah, absolutely could, yes. There's frequently legislative pushes to do away with the types of programs that fund these types of things, and there's simultaneously legislation that's going to, that makes the programs mandatory. So right now, this is an offset to the county general fund. We're able to pay for those programs because of our ability to charge commissions for phone calls, to charge a small commission on the commissary, which would be the food and drink, refreshments, extra items that they're able to purchase while they're in custody. But I'll just put that on the board's radar that this is a budget that may not exist in some time. 2216, Sheriff Pool Vehicle Replacement is our trust fund for our non-pursuit vehicles. That would be our office vehicles, our vehicles that aren't that are on patrol with the red lights and siren. Any questions on that? And the Sheriff Pursuit Vehicle Replacement, this is the same budget for our pursuit vehicles, the vehicles with lights and sirens. What I will share, and I'm sure I'm not the only department that's dealing with this, is the cost of vehicles seems to be skyrocketing. I think we went from last year purchasing pursuit vehicles, on average, we paid about $37,000, and this year we're having to pay $48,000 for those same vehicles. The other challenges that we have is we also pay for the equipment out of this trust fund that goes in those vehicles. They don't come from the factory with cages. They don't come from the factory with the mounts for the radios and the sirens, the in-car computers, and the cameras. In years past, the industry standard for patrol vehicles was a Crown Victoria for I don't know how many years. They don't make Crown Victorias anymore. And what we're finding is that about every 3 to 5 years, which is about the life cycle of one of these vehicles, they do some design changes, which makes it impossible for us to transfer much of that equipment out of an old vehicle and put it in a new vehicle, which in turn results in us having to not only spend more for the vehicle, but we have to spend more for equipment that will fit. So those are some of the challenges that we expect to see. Long term, we're going to, I don't know what the answers are going to be with the switch to all electric vehicles in the state of California. I can't help but imagine that that's going to not be problematic at some state, particularly when we're in an area where we have disasters, when we have people that are going to be out deployed during disasters, sometimes for 12 or 14-hour shifts. What the life cycle of the battery is going to be and how that's going to impact us, as well as the infrastructure that's going to be needed at the sheriff's office, as well as the issues that are going to come with the take-home vehicle program that the county now offers with employees using their own power to fuel the vehicles at home. So lots to consider with that. Fortunately, that's a little bit down the road, and we'll have plenty of time to have lots of discussions on that.
Well, hopefully they'll allow for hybrid so we can still use in case of those emergencies and no power, if that makes any sense.
I hope so. Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Priuses from now on.
Yes. Yeah.
Quick question, just curious if you can get us a list of all your vehicles, just to kind of see where you are, what year, what mileage, just to get an idea of what your fleet looks like, just because that way we can expect what's to come.
Okay.
Please, thank you.
And some of those vehicles last a lot longer than others. Of course, the patrol vehicles that are driven daily generally don't last quite as long as some of our pool vehicles that are just driven for administrative purposes. 2218 Sheriff Search and Rescue. The funding source from this is either ongoing donations that we happen to receive, and the initial funding source, and I can never pronounce her last name, Mizuki. I don't want to botch her last name, but a lady whose husband was located, I believe rescued by Sheriff Search and Rescue some time ago, left a pretty significant endowment upon her death to the sheriff's office, and that's the funding source from this. It doesn't draw down from general fund. It's not self-funded. It just continues to exist. Any expenditures, my policy has been, if there's an expenditure request for some sort of equipment, which is typically a utility vehicle, something that they can use in off-road situations, equipment for the volunteers that serve in this program, those types of things. I lean very heavily on what the Search and Rescue Volunteer Board has to say on this. Any questions on that? 2220 is the Sheriff Post. As I mentioned earlier with the STC fund, Post is the regulatory authority in California that oversees 830.1 A-piece officers, which would be your patrol deputy sheriffs and detectives. This is the fund, the budget unit that provides for that training, and of course we also seek reimbursement for any reimbursable training that's available. Every deputy sheriff is required to undergo at least 24 hours of recognized certified training every 2 years, and a portion of that has to be in some specific disciplines. There's perishable skills training for defensive tactics, for firearms, for tactical communications, and there's an additional training that's provided now for de-escalation as well. 2221. Sheriff's Local Law Enforcement Block Grant. We applied for this grant a couple years ago. This position, or this fund's a part-time position in our evidence section, where there's a continuous effort to purge old evidence. It's not a matter of just looking at the date on something and deciding it's been around too long. There's quite a bit of research that has to go in to determine whether or not a particular piece of evidence can legally be disposed of. This person deals with found property, property that's held for safekeeping, evidence, and that relieves some of the burden of our full-time staff in the evidence room, and her position's paid for out of this. 2301 jail facilities. Last week, we had 17 vacancies. As of this week, we'll have 19 vacancies. We had a retirement and a resignation that are effective this week. And that's with the Deputy Sheriff Corrections. As you heard in the earlier presentation, the major project that we have, two major projects that we have going there at a 1785 are the generator install and the tower control upgrade. I won't bother you any more than I already have regarding my staffing woes out there. I've taken plenty of the board time talking about that. And I'll also take this opportunity again to thank you for your assistance in helping us find solutions in our staffing out there. One of the changes that we have out there, we've changed a law enforcement records technician position to a staff services analyst. When we talk about the programs deputy, we're also looking to have a position that's going to be similar with that staff services analyst in anticipation of the implementation of Cal-AIM, so that the staff services analyst will be coordinating some services. They'll also be coordinating some of the programs that we have available out there as well, and free up one of those deputy sheriff positions. Quite frankly, the records tech position went unfilled for many years, with there not being much interest in that position at the assigned pay scale. And the last thing that we have, I believe I spoke with one of the supervisors, or it might have been with the whole group, about the program that WellPath is contracted with the state to provide restoration of competency programs within certain jails within the state, hopefully to have all jails within the state covered. Currently, we have, I believe, around 14 people that we're holding that are deemed incompetent to stand trial, rather than trying to send them out to the state hospitals, which is always difficult because they have limited bed space as well. The program will seek to provide those services here locally to either get them restored or make a determination that they're not going to be fit to stand trial at all.
Am I incorrect that Care Court is supposed to try and help with that?
I don't know what Care Court's function will be in that. I think Care Court's probably more designed to help people that may have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, homelessness issues, and try to get them steered in that direction. The incompetent to stand trial is where there's been a judicial determination that the person's not mentally fit. They don't understand court proceedings, which could be the case with somebody that would be eligible for Care Court services, but certainly not all of them.
Because I know I saw both presentations about the IFTs and the IFTs, I don't know if that's the correct, but incompetent to stand trial and Care Court all simultaneously. So I got this feeling that there might be some assistance to get people in a place and a state of mind that maybe they would get off of the incompetence to stand trial and be able to move on and move forward.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of crossover, but you also have the potential that you have somebody that's incompetent to stand trial that isn't experiencing homeless issues or substance, or just have an organic disability or mental illness.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's very high likelihood there will be a lot of crossover in those programs.
And that's what that additional, I know we added 2 positions to the jail. Are both of those the mental health?
The 2 positions, I think there's a change from the proposed, or the preliminary budgets, and those positions are coming out of the CCP allocations, Community Corrections Partnership. Anything else on 2301?
No.
One update for the jail, effective yesterday, we've removed the mask mandate pursuant to guidance from CDPH out at the jail. So Masks are not required. Of course, they're still optional and people want to wear them. We encourage them to do so, but I think that's, when you talk about the non-tangibles, I can't help but believe that's going to be one of those non-monetary things that might improve a little bit of morale out there. I can't imagine walking around for 12 hours with a mask on my face. Budget Unit 2704. As your board is aware, we've had finally some success in hiring some staff. We hired an emergency services manager by the name of Leah Saudelay after the retirement of our previous emergency services manager, Dale Carnathan. And then just a couple months ago, we hired her an emergency services specialist named Alma Perez, who's local to Lake County. Alma's finishing up her initial training, getting up to speed on all her ICS training, and they're also working with our public information officer on some outreach. They've been working on some outreach on fire preparedness, getting messaging out. They're also working on the hazard mitigation grant protocol that came to the board last week, I believe, to authorize establishment of a committee to get some public input and some guidance on what our hazard mitigation plan should look like. And they're also working with our partner cities to encourage updating of all of the EOPs within the county operational area. There's, I believe, some of the EOPs that are floating around out in the county are a little bit old and probably need to be brought up to date. So we're trying to make sure that all the entities that have an EOP have one that's fairly current. I believe that's it. Is that all 21?
I don't know, did we do 2304 and 2305?
Where we got?
Yeah,
Not ours.
2304, wait, no, I'm sorry.
Says jail, medical, and
Oh, yeah.
criminal justice programs?
2304 is the health department.
Oh, okay. It says sheriff coroner in front of it for me, so.
Oh,
I'll talk to you if you want.
you should have given it to us and we don't know.
I don't know.
Is it? Okay.
Any other questions on this?
You guys do something.
No, it's just incorrect on my thing. No worries. No, I don't have any further questions. I think the most important is to staff up and figure out how to get there. But I think, as we suggested yesterday, these are short-term fixes, and we need to look at more long-term solutions to make sure that we don't keep coming back every 6 months trying to figure out how to make that work.
Hey, I don't want to get on a pedestal. I'd be here for longer than I've been. I was hoping to get out of here quicker than an hour, and I think I'm on track, hopefully, to do that. But as I mentioned, I think it's societal. In speaking with one of the Highway Patrol administrators, they had a hiring event in Eureka last weekend where they had the entire Northern Division come up and do a presentation where they had the helicopter on display, the motor units out there. They had department representatives out there already to explain what it would be like. CHP has an effort to hire 1,000 Highway Patrol officers within the next year. And he informed me they had 9 people show up for a 5-hour presentation. So it's tough. It's not just us. It's and I think things will change. I think as the economy definitely has an impact not only on law enforcement but on government work in general. I think as the economy starts to level out, that will maybe, and as we come out of the pandemic, maybe they'll start pushing people. It's a rewarding career. It definitely is. It's certainly a rewarding and exciting career, and I think maybe we'll start to see some people turn towards law enforcement a little bit more in the future.
I don't see any other questions. Anyone from the public that has any questions on this budget item? I don't see anyone in the chambers that has a question, so I'll look online. And I don't see any hands up, so I'll bring it back to the board for action.
And I'll make a motion, but I hope that we have you coming back to us with a request for more of that force multiplier. Anything that can help because of your lack of staff, I think, is absolutely necessary. And I'm sure that we haven't hit our plateau of the need of that technology. So hopefully that we can see that soon, because they need help out there.
Thank you.
I move to approve Budget Units 1785, 2201, 2202, 2203, 2204, 2205, 2206, 2207, 2208, 2210, 2212, 2213, 2214, 2215, 2216, 2217, 2218, 2220, 2221, 2301, and 2704 as presented.
With
We need to make
changes.
that adjustment.
With the
generator.
adjustment to 1785 with 225,000 added to 63-13 in the appropriations and 225,000 added to 81-22 in the revenues.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, and motion carries.
So long ago.
Thank you.
Thank
Saying I
you.
talked a long time? Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So does anybody need a break, or we can continue on, or we're good? Just making sure? All right.
All right, next up is Public Works Administration, Budget Unit 1903. That can be found on page D57. And they are requesting a budget of $1,463,887. And I will turn it over to the department head, Scott DeLeon. Tried to hold it out long enough.
Sheriff got the seat nice and warm.
Ew.
He's been here for a while. And just a clarification, he stole Alma Perez from Water Resources.
Yep.
She's a wonderful employee. We're happy to see her have opportunity to grow and expand, so.
He's usually pretty excited about stealing employees from
Yes.
people in the county.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Scott DeLeon, Public Works and Water Resources Director. I'm here today with Alicia Ayala. She's our Deputy Director of Public Works in charge of administration. We're, between the two agencies, we have 18 primary, what I'm going to call primary budget units, and approximately 34 secondary budget units. I've prepared a thorough presentation of all 52 budget units. I'm kidding. What we're going to do is hit the highlights of this year's budget, including significant changes, project or goals of the various budget units of Public Works and Water Resources. And so we'll start with 1903 DPW admin. DPW admin has 10 full-time funded positions. I heard earlier there was some discussion about non-funded positions. We have a couple in this budget unit that are position allocations, and they are unfunded. I will tell you, you asked the department head at the time what kind of the reasoning for that, and I will tell you my reasoning for why I have unfunded positions. I use them largely for succession planning. I also am of the belief that once you have a position allocation in a budget unit, you don't want to let it go because sometimes you might not be able to get it back. And so for those two reasons, I like to, if I have a position that is unfunded or is not needed at the time, we will show it as unfunded. So that's the reason why. And you look at a few of the budget units that we have and you'll see positions that are unfunded. It's, again, for those reasons, largely for succession planning. DPW admin is responsible for the overall administration of the entire department to include all clerical, fiscal, and management functions. The revenue for this budget unit is derived from all the various budget units that utilize their services. So you will see in every other budget unit a contribution to DPW admin, and those are that's the revenue for this budget unit. There aren't any significant changes to this budget unit. Our primary goal for this year will be the successful recruitment of an Assistant Director of Public Works. Any questions? Okay. I'll move on. 1908, engineering and inspection. We have 9 full-time positions. Again, if you look at that chart, there are some unfunded positions there. We have 3 vacancies in the division. The biggest change with this budget unit was the addition of the deputy county surveyor as a full-time position. That was a part-time position, and we promoted our technician to that position full-time. The change was appropriate due to the outstanding level of work being performed by the technician at that time. And, at the end of my presentation, I'm going to thank admin, but I'll take the opportunity right at this moment to thank admin for that. The surveyor positions are funded through the general fund, and so this was an additional ask of the general fund. It's working out very well, and we're doing very good work up there at the county surveyor's office. We also, when you've met him, we do have a full-time county surveyor, Vance Ricks. He has been with us now for a few months and is doing excellent work. 3011, road department. I'm sorry, did you have any questions on that?
I do. So the secure funding for various road improvement projects, what type of grants are you looking at for those projects to make sure that we can keep the goals that were set in the plan that you brought to us last spring?
So, and you're looking at
1908? It says goals for 2022.
Right. So staff pursues just about every state and federal grant opportunity that we feel will fit. In fact, we just submitted last week 3 applications for state funding through the HSIP program, Highway Safety Improvement Plan program. And so we could be here for a while if I tried to list every grant opportunity that we chase. We went after and secured funding through Congressman Thompson's office when they requested, do you have any projects that we can ask for? And we had a project in Kelseyville that we submitted, and it ultimately was approved. So that's what that bullet is for. That's what that goal is to chase every opportunity for funding. So anytime we work with the APC, we ask them to be on the lookout for any funding opportunity, and so that's what that bullet is. It's looking at every federal and state opportunity. And yes, if we can fit a project that we've identified as in our pavement rehabilitation plan, we will certainly put that in there. Unfortunately, most grant programs are for specific or systemic projects. They aren't for deferred maintenance or making improvements because of deferred maintenance. So funding for just general maintenance or rehabilitation, those types of projects are generally not eligible. They're largely just project specific. And in fact, the HSIP projects that we applied for last week are all either specific project sites or systemic projects.
Okay. And I guess it might be a different budget unit to talk more about the roads and the road projects.
It's coming up in the very next one.
Yeah, so I'll save my question for that. But what's the timeline for the Socrates Mine Road project to be completed?
So just had a conversation with the consultant on that. They've combined the two slides into one construction project. We have some draft plans and specifications for that I'm reviewing. We intend to put that project out to bid this fall and for construction next spring.
Okay, that was a big question at the geothermal meeting.
It's always a big question. It has been since it happened.
Yeah. Yes.
So a quick question. So yes, you have 3 unfunded, so that leaves you really with 9 personnel total. Right now it shows 12 when it comes to HR because it counts the unfunded. But that's still very close to 50% of the total because right now it shows 5 filled. what is your current efforts to fill those in, and how much is that kind of slowing down the ability to get, because in our 5-year plan, we want to be aggressive. And I'm certain that having a lack of engineers in the staff is going to make it more difficult to be as aggressive as maybe we want to be. What are the current efforts being made to try to fill those positions, and do we need to have a further discussion about that?
So we have had a position open for the principal civil engineer, which is the manager of the engineering and inspection division. It's been open for some time. We initially were going to hire a consultant to do a combined recruitment for assistant director and principal civil engineer. We decided to just pursue the assistant director at this time with the belief that we'll be successful. And because the principal engineer and the assistant the principal engineer and the assistant director work so closely together, we were hopeful that we'll then do a recruitment for the principal with the new assistant director. So that's kind of the plan for that position. We have interviewed and offered positions over the past year. I've had at least 3 people go through the entire process, accept the position, and then decline it. And I have a local young man that has a civil engineering degree, just recently graduated from Sacramento, and he is, he's cleared, he's going to start. We're just working on a start date with him, and we're very excited. We've got a local person with an engineering degree, and we're excited to add that person to the staff as an assistant engineer. And with respect to the pavement plan, or the pavement rehabilitation plan, and the construction plans for that, my plan for that, because you're right, we don't have the capacity to do that, is to bring in consultants for that. And we're working on using the City of Clear Lake's recent RFP for engineering services to kind of piggyback off of that competitive process to bring in some consultants.
So, to bring in consultants, so it wouldn't be using Dave Schwartz or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because I worry about that, because I want to see it getting done, but if we don't have the capacity to get it done, then it's hard to set those expectations.
Right.
I have another capacity question, and we're having our weekly meetings on dealing with the trees and the right-of-ways, and so I'm not sure which of these units that, because you're going to need to contract that out too, right? Isn't that what we've been talking about? So you've got your RFP. So I just wanted the rest of the board to understand that impact on your department right now as we move forward with that giant project.
Yeah, well, right now that impact's on me.
Right.
And so, which is why I'm really working hard to get a consultant. So all we have to do is administer a contract and let the consultant handle that plan. But yeah, there will be some oversight.
Yeah, but then also maybe that assistant too could help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? All right. 3011, the road department. We have 34 full-time positions in this budget unit. As of today, we have 12 vacancies. The road department is responsible for protecting and maintaining 613 centerline miles of road, 125 bridges, and thousands of drainage culverts. And though this is the largest individual budget in the department, the majority of the funding and the appropriations are for specific projects with specific non-discretionary funding sources. One of the primary goals for the budget is the implementation of the pavement rehabilitation plan, and we have allocated $6.4 million for the first year of that plan. And We took advantage, we talk about funding, we took advantage of some special federal funding. It was the Coronavirus Response and Relief Fund. I know I'm getting the acronym wrong. CRRSSA, I think was the acronym. We had an opportunity to secure some funding through that for a new chip cart for chip sealing. We have a 1990 Etnire chip cart. We completed our chip seal program this year with baling wire and that thing, it's on its last legs. And so this funding came in just at the right time. The road department will cover the balance. It's not enough to cover the full cost of the chip cart, but the road department will pick up the balance. And we're working with Caltrans right now to do all the paperwork in order to get those funds released and available to us to purchase that cart. And should we be fortunate to have your board's approval of our budget today, I will be contacting the supplier of the chip cart to pull the trigger on that purchase. So we're excited about that. Any questions? I know you had some questions about the pavement plan. So 3011 is where the funding for the pavement projects is located.
Mm-hmm. And when you had that presentation, looking out at the, I think, years 2 through 5, we don't have the funding for that. And so, what are we doing proactively to fill that gap?
So the quick answer is we're probably going to need to extend the time. We had hoped for this to be a 5-year plan. It's probably going to need to be a 10-year plan. The other thing, and I still need to bring back to your board the final plan, it's in flux. It's moving all the time. One of the things I want to do is change around some of the time. Cobb Mountain, for example, was in year 5. Personally, and I'm not
going to make it 5 years.
Yeah, those roads aren't going to make it another 5 years.
Yeah.
So we need to modify and adjust the timing. I also have PG&E tearing my roads up and putting stuff in underground, and I'm having to work with them or trying to work with them to get their plan. Has not been easy because frankly, I don't know if they have a 5-year plan. I know what they want to do, or they know what they want to do, but we're having difficulty trying to coordinate that.
It is difficult when they're not telling us until the week before they start the project.
Right. So all of these things are contributing to the reason why I haven't come back with that final plan, because I'm still balancing it and still moving it and trying to make it realistic to where we can afford it.
And not to mention some of the areas when we looked at it in different either town halls or presentations, some of the areas are like, because of the consultant put those on there, so they're not really even part of it, so you'll be able to address.
There are roads that probably don't need to be on there, roads that we could handle in-house don't need to be on that. And they're really low volume roads and they skipped roads that have a lot more cars on them that really need to be on that plan. So yes, we're balancing all of that. I'm balancing all that.
Supervisor Spatier?
Yeah, just made me think when you were talking about PG&E, what's our status of our franchise fee? If they're giving us more problems on our roads, is there maybe a chance to review the franchise fee agreement that we have with them?
I'll have to check with county council on
When's
that.
the last time we reviewed that?
We haven't, since I've been the director.
Yeah, that might be an opportunity to kind of, I don't know.
I'll make a note and I'll ask county council.
Okay, because I know we probably have some of those franchise fee agreements also with CNS Waste Solutions and others like that. It would be, I haven't seen any of those things come back up, at least since I've been on the board for the last 4 years. So I don't know enough to say what they actually contribute and what the actual agreement is, but typically it's based on the usage of the infrastructure that they're on. to try and be able to maintain the wear and tear.
And generally, with those agreements, if it's a project, if it's a project that they are initiating, that they need to do, you know, they have to comply with our standards. So we've been working with them on the trenching and when it's a project that we have that, and they are in the way, we have to provide them notice and they need to move. And there's a lot of nuances on who pays for what. But we'll need to look at that, and we've made a note to talk to county council.
They basically set the stage for how the collaboration works. And then my next question is, it's been a while since I've seen it. I think it's been since Clear Lake Oaks Sidewalk Project, CDBG. I know it's kind of a four-letter word for some people. It's a difficult reporting system, but at the same time, it's typically a pretty large and hefty potential grant that can come to the county. Is that also one of those options that is available to us? And also HCD. I know that HCD now started receiving what I believe is FEMA dollars, and the city of Clear Lake utilized that for the last, I think they did 12 or 15 miles for the sulfur fire recovery. And that was from 2017. So I'm wondering, is there a 2018 fire recovery fund that we might be able to access, maybe also through HCD? So those are things I would like to see connected to when you bring us back the 5-year plan, because I think that would increase our revenues a whole lot so we don't have to use it. And my last thing is, because you have so much carryover, what's the chance of using that carryover to leverage matching fund grants that are out there where we put down 20%, 25%, and the rest is provided to us? It's a lot harder if we don't have a large amount to be able to play with. So I think we have an opportunity to play with what we have versus just use what we have.
You're right.
To really increase that capacity.
And as long as it's an eligible expense for gas tax, because that's all that carryover that you see is SB1 and gas tax.
Yeah, so typically like collector arterials versus like residential.
It's got to be county road, it's got to be county public road.
Yeah.
County maintained road related. But yes, those are all options. The key to that 5-year plan and having the construction plans completed for all of those, that's the key to leverage those types of funds. They rarely will pay for preliminary engineering or environmental work or right-of-way acquisition. Those funding sources are looking for, and I hate the term shovel-ready, but they are looking for projects that are ready to go to construction. And having those plans would make us eligible for things like that.
Okay. Backing up just a little bit, your engineers, do they have the potential for incentive pay?
Yes. Yep. That's one of the classifications on that incentive pay, engineers. Yes.
One of the other things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Will Evans from Clerk is looking at one of the CAL FIRE grants for a veg crew to do the right-of-way clearing because we're so far behind on that work. And I think that those grants are going to be announced in October. So definitely something that we need to look at for a multi-year program.
Yep. No, we're waiting to see that come out.
Yeah.
Yep. We're waiting to see that announcement.
And then did you order that masticating head yet?
Not yet.
or not?
We're getting prices on it.
Okay, awesome.
I'm thinking in my mind, when are we receiving these things when we order it? Because everyone seems to be in back order or supply chain issues. So hopefully we get all those things sooner than later.
We're going to talk about that, and I heard the sheriff talk about it, and I'm going to echo a couple of things that he said in later budget units, but we're experiencing the same problems. I'll move on to 3122, which is Lamson Airport. The biggest change with this budget unit is we separated the right-of-way agent / airport operations coordinator position, which used to be a single position. We've been recruiting for that for some time. And as you can imagine, it's a very peculiar and unique skill set, right-of-way agent and an airport coordinator. And it ended up that way over time because the individual that was in that position for almost 20 years, it just through the reclassification process, that position morphed into this unique position. Well, we've separated those, and we've created an extra help airport operations coordinator position. Again, a shout out to admin for assistance with that. And we're confident that that's going to make the recruitment for both of those positions actually a little easier. And we've already received some interest in the airport coordinator position, and we'll be starting that recruitment as soon as everything's been approved. For 3123 Lamson Airport capital projects, we have a new consultant working with us on capital projects, and they are working on the development of plans for the next phase of improvements out at the airport, which is pavement rehabilitation for the parking area. If you recall, we did the runway and taxiway a couple summers ago, and so the next big project would be the parking area. Between the submittal of our preliminary budget and today, we became aware, and again, it's through our new consultant, we became aware of a new federal funding opportunity through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the bill funds. And in order to take advantage of that funding, we need to do some engineering, some preliminary engineering for the development of some plans. Because the airport is largely funded through FAA entitlements, it gets really, really messy if you try to change your airport capital improvement plan and put, because the project we want to do is hangar development. Well, that is not a high priority project with the FAA. And so even if we tried to change our capital improvement plan to this hangar development, they probably wouldn't accept it. And so the only way we can really take advantage of this bill funding is to do the engineering in-house, or have our consultant do the engineering and have the plans, the preliminary environmental, everything wrapped up and do that in-house. And then we would be able to take advantage of this other federal funding, which is kind of outside of the FAA. So we made a special request of special funding from admin of $100,000 for that engineering, and that has been included in this budget unit. And by completing the engineering with the local funds, if we hold off and utilize the full measure of those bill funds, it's nearly $1 million. They're $159,000 per year, starting in 2022, and they sunset in 2027. So we would be able to, if we waited until 2027 for the project, we'd be able to take advantage of almost $1 million worth of funding through this infrastructure law. We probably won't wait that long, but the point is by relatively small investment in the preliminary engineering, we'll be able to take advantage of these bill funds where otherwise we would not be able to. So again, very appreciative of admin's assistance with that. Any questions regarding Lamson? Okay.
Just a
yeah.
quick question. Parking lot is for where the airplanes are parking?
Yes.
I hope that we can review the cost of parking once we give them a new place to park.
Those costs, we escalate those, and you'll probably see that in the next fee schedule increase. You'll see those increase.
Is it still $5?
I think is it 5 or?
And 5 for single and 7
Because I can't park my car in a parking garage for less than maybe $5 an hour,
Right.
let alone $5 a day in an airport.
The next item is 9905, ISF Central Garage. We have 5 full-time positions with this budget unit and 1 vacancy. This budget unit is responsible for the operation of the county fleet, which contains 132 total vehicles. We've talked about this before. We're in the middle of a trial period where we're utilizing leases for a number of vehicles. I think we have 11 or 12 vehicles in this lease program. We're still kind of at the beginning of this. We are just now starting to return vehicles at the end of the lease, and we need to go through that several times. We need a lot more experience with returning vehicles before we can really make some conclusions or draw some conclusions about the efficacy of this lease program. I can tell you that we're finding some trends with the lease vehicles. They tend to be a little more expensive than a vehicle per month, than a vehicle that was purchased and put into the fleet, largely because of the monthly lease fee. So we charge the operation rate and then a rate to cover the lease fee, and we're finding that that's a lot more expensive than had we just charged the replacement and operation. One of the benefits to the lease is there's no upfront cost. So a department, if they really needed a vehicle, we could get one for them at no cost upfront, but they're going to pay more per month. Is basically the summary of where we're at right now. As the sheriff indicated, we are seeing much higher costs for vehicles, both in operation, as you can imagine, the fuel costs, with the price of fuel has gone up, and frankly, everything's gone up. Oil, other parts has all gone up, and then, of course, the cost of the vehicles has gone up. As a result, we increased the monthly mileage rates 2 cents per mile for both operation and replacement. So all the vehicles that are currently in the fleet and assigned to other departments, they're going to be paying 2 cents a mile more for operations and replacement. We are looking at a number of hybrid vehicle options. We intend to replace 9 vehicles this year that are in the fleet. We are looking at hybrid. We have not gone to full electric just yet for a couple of reasons: cost and lack of infrastructure to support that. However, we have been working with Public Services and PG&E. We sat in on a meeting with PG&E a couple months ago about potential funding opportunities for infrastructure for electric vehicles. And unfortunately, at this time, there just really isn't anything that is usable or that we're qualified for. But we'll continue to work with both Public Services and PG&E to try to get that infrastructure in place. Obviously, that's the direction our state is going based on some of the actions that our governor has taken. So we need to do that, but we need the infrastructure to be able to utilize those vehicles. Any questions regarding Central Garage?
Supervisor Sabatier?
Just comment on the governor's budget this year. I know that he did put some funds in there, obviously, to help with those, that electrification, building out that capacity for it. So I don't think anything's coming out yet, but also look at the state budget and opportunities there.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
Absolutely. I had the same question for Sheriff Martin. I'd love to get a list of what is the vehicle pool look like, what year, mileage, just to kind of get an idea of where we are. That way, again, we can expect what needs to change and what needs to happen and when we can start seeing some of those transitions towards more hybrid or electric or eventually potentially hydrogen, who knows? There's all kinds of renewable things that are going to be coming out for us.
We can get that for you. That's pretty easily done.
And maybe you can help me, but I think it's the sheriff, yourself, and social services are the 3 fleet people, or is there another?
No, those are the largest. I mean, we have a number of vehicles and yes, for the fleets, the departments that are managing their own, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And I appreciate the info also on the enterprise contract. That is something that sounds good until you really see it on paper. It doesn't sound like it's not working, but it doesn't sound like it's the savings that maybe we anticipated to see.
And the vehicles are not available even through them. We still have issues.
They have the same struggles?
We have the same struggles. And in fact, we have vehicles that they're allowing us to keep for extended periods because they don't have a vehicle to replace it. So we're struggling with that. We had a vehicle last year that we purchased through the state bid. We ordered it through a dealer in Sacramento. The dealer got the vehicle and decided that he didn't want to give it to us because they could sell it for so much more money off of the lot than they were going to get by going through the state contract. And so they ended up keeping the vehicle and selling it. And they said, well, we'll order you another one, but we don't know when it'll get here. So those are the kinds of things that we're dealing with. It's pretty frustrating.
And then my last question is staffing-wise. I know you've been trying to hire a heavy equipment operator for quite some time. And obviously, any change towards a more electrified fleet is going to change the type of operations of what's going on in the central garage. Skill sets will need to change as well. How much is that hurting you from having that lack of the heavy operator, and what's the expected change as far as what you need to continue with whatever new vehicle?
Yeah, I think you meant a mechanic.
Yes,
Yeah.
not operator.
It hasn't really hurt us to a degree. Our folks are well-trained. They are capable of all of the vehicles that we have. I'm going to presume that additional training for different types of vehicles will be made available. We have had hybrid vehicles in the fleet before, so it's not something that's completely out of the ordinary. We obviously have not had any electric vehicles, and that could prove to be.
It's an empty hood.
Yeah. And it may result in, for those vehicles, we just have to send them to the supplier or to the dealer to do the maintenance. Okay?
Looks like we have a question from someone online. If you can unmute, and Elizabeth Larson, if you'd like to unmute. Hello? I'm not sure if, we can't hear you if you're unmuted. There you go.
Maybe put her question in chat.
Yeah, maybe write in chat, or once we get to finishing fleet maintenance, we'll come back and she can probably identify the budget item that she's asking a question about. Actually, there's another, I think Betsy Kahn just put her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out that at least on the participatory access I have, chat is disabled.
Okay, the chat is this. All right, thank you. I don't know if we can address that, but the chat apparently. And Elizabeth, I still see your hand up, so I don't know if you heard what I said, if we could just get to the.
The chat is disabled because we're on the webinar Zoom, and you have to be brought into the panel in order for the chat to work for you.
All right.
So, Chairman Crandall, I was able to enable the chat for members of the public to chat with hosts and panelists only.
Okay.
So we can receive a question from Elizabeth Larson, but you'll still need to read out the question.
Okay. And so we'll continue forward, and then when we get to the end, we'll see if the microphone works. So we'll go from
Okay.
there. Go ahead.
So I'm going to move on to water resources. That department has 9 full-time employees with 1 current vacancy. We have 15 extra help employees in our Quagga Mussel program, and there's 1 vacancy in that program. The majority of our significant projects and programs reside in Budget Unit 8109, and I will get to that, but I'm going to just highlight some of the other budget units before we get to that. We have 4 flood zones around the county, and I'm not going to talk about each one of them, but collectively, they all have unique challenges with revenues and performance of maintenance. Between funding shortfalls and increasingly onerous permitting processes, we face challenges with performing the necessary maintenance in every one of these zones. Chairman Crandall, you're experiencing some of the impacts of that with the drainage facilities around the town of Upper Lake, where we're seeing gravel accumulation and vegetation growth, which results in reduced capacity of those channels. That reduced capacity has the potential to impact the community, and the community is rightly concerned. We will continue to work with the various agencies on permitting and pursue outside funding opportunities whenever possible to work through these issues. We've made it through another budget with the 4 budget units for the flood zones. It's 8101, 8104, 8105, and 8108. But I've been speaking with Deputy Director Delagianis, and we both agree that we need to plan on bringing an item to your board in the near future to discuss some of the various options and issues that we're having with these budget units. Each one of them is unique, and each one of them has some issues. And so, again, we've made it through this budget unit, or this budget prep for this year, but we'll bring an item to you in the near future. With that, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into 8109. That is the Watershed Protection District budget. 5 of the top priority projects in the district, or that the district's responsible for, are within this budget unit. And that's, I'm not going to suggest that the other projects and programs that we work on isn't important, but these 5 are the ones that have the most impact, and they impact the greatest number of people. And those projects are the Quagga Mussel Prevention Program, the Middle Creek Restoration Project, our stormwater/water quality programs, the National Flood Insurance Program, and the Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan. We could have meetings, we could spend the rest of the day on each one of those projects, but what I would like to do is just highlight some of the things that occurred. Staff was successful in obtaining state and federal grant funds to continue providing ramp monitors at the various public ramps for our Quagga Mussel Prevention Program. These folks are the ambassadors of our program. They're responsible for the public outreach. They're the ones that have the day-to-day interaction with the boaters, and they help boaters or help educate boaters about how they are the ones that are going to help keep invasive species out of our lake. They do amazing work, and if you've ever had a chance to go down to a boat ramp and watch our ramp monitors interact with the public, you'll see what I mean, that they are the ambassadors of our program, and they represent the county very well. This program also funds, on occasion, Quagga dogs, a canine that comes in and has been trained to smell for quagga mussels, and So during high weekends or holiday weekends, we bring those quagga sniffing dogs in, and they're really fun to watch, and they just, again, are great ambassadors for our program. We continue to work with our consultants on the purchase of properties for the Middle Creek project. And this past year, we made some good progress on property acquisition. I have some excellent news that I'm excited to share today. I just learned this, that our grant funds for property acquisition, the timeline was extended to 2028.
2028,
Yes,
That's great
Amazing.
news.
2028.
because
So-
the previous deadline was June of 2023.
Right.
Awesome.
So they've given us another 5 years. So again, very, very excited to share that news today.
Thank you.
Great news.
We recently completed the documentation necessary for the National Flood Insurance Community Rating System recertification. I forwarded you all some emails about that. We were successful in retaining our rating of 7 with our CRS program, and that affords folks in Lake County a 15% rebate on their flood insurance policy. So again, great work by the staff on that. And then finally, as you're all aware, the staff and the consultant completed the Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Do you have any questions regarding 8109?
Yeah, I have a quick question. The 14 million, or, sorry, 15.377 million in intergovernment revenues, is that Middle Creek Restoration Funds? Is that Sigma funds? Is it just kind of a bunch of different funds, or just one? Because I thought we spent more money than that.
That is the Quagga, or the grant for the Middle Creek project.
Okay.
Yep.
And
We probably have, it's just, things haven't hit, they just haven't hit, it's just a timing thing.
And then my last question for this one is reimbursements. I know that we've had to front you some money. Actually, yeah, I think you fronted yourself some money from your reserves because the state was taking so long to repay. Has that been collected and
Yes.
reconciled?
A few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yes, so we did
Took some
receive.
time, but at least we
We
get
did
it done.
receive payment from the state for those invoices, so yes.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you covered everything because you're on 8109, or are you going back to the
No,
other ones?
that's going to conclude my planned presentation, but we'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
So there's a couple online, but I'll just ask mine briefly. And I know we've talked about this, but I just want to be able to speak to it. In the 8108 budget, and this is the Zone 8 Upper Lake Middle Creek Basin. There's a lot of questions about the tax collection that comes forward to it, and I see here that there's last year there was 66,818, and now this year there's 85,470. And each year there's a specific amount allocated to conduct vegetation management, and that in essence takes care of half of that assessed tax collection. Am I correct on that? Or does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, the effort on the levies changes from year to year depending on what project and what is happening. We don't say we're going to use half of it. We use whatever is necessary to perform that level of work.
Oh, okay, so it's just like based upon that year?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so actually that basically answers my question on that. I know too that you're working on something coming forward in the future about starting to get a plan together in that area, and I know that's grant funded, if that makes any sense. I think that's what I've noticed. So I just wanted to confirm that comes from a grant. Yeah.
Yes, so under revenues, for that same budget unit, under intergovernment revenues, I believe that $160,000 is the feasibility study grant.
Okay, and so and then that feasibility study will give us the opportunity to start budgeting for future projects or whatever comes from that feasibility study.
Yes.
Okay.
And you mentioned the the elimination of reserves. In that action that you took a few weeks ago to provide the department some interim funding while we were waiting on those other funds, one of the things that you approved was the use of some money to hire the consultant to prepare some preliminary plans for a project to remove gravel and the vegetation out of the creek channel. We need those plans for a number of reasons. Number one, you need that to be able to define the scope of the project. We need to know how many yards of material are we pulling out, how many yards, what is the scope of the project, and preliminary costs for that as well. We'll use those plans to begin the negotiations with the state on the types of permits that are going to be necessary and the environmental clearances that'll be necessary for that project. So your board approved that, and we'll be bringing you the amendment, and I actually think it's on next Tuesday's agenda for the amendment with Peterson Brustad to prepare those plans.
All right. Thank you for that. And there is 2 questions unless someone else has something on public input.
Go for it. I have questions, but I'll wait till
You
you're
sure?
done. Yeah, go for it.
So the first question, I'll read it from Elizabeth Larson. My questions are about the Lakeside Heights project. I see it's listed on the construction projects for $3,370,000. Do you have a timeline for when this might take place? And is the gabion wall that was proposed previously? Also, I didn't see any ramp extensions in the budget. Are there any plans to pursue such projects at the various public and park ramps managed by the county? And then also, I don't see anything in this year's budget for levee improvement in the Upper Lake area. Will that be budgeted for next year once the feasibility study alternatives are fully reviewed and final alternatives are selected?
So the approximate timing for the Lakeside Heights project is next summer. We have a consultant that's preparing the plans, and we're working with Caltrans on the funding and that whole process of environmental clearance. And so that project is tentatively scheduled for next construction season. The bin wall, she questioned the bin wall, and I guess the short answer is no. There have been some modifications to the design, and it still involves a wall, but it's a little different style of wall, and it's in a different location. But that project's tentatively scheduled for next construction season. She asked about ramp extensions. Water Resources doesn't manage any ramps. So the funding for any types of projects like that would not be in our budget units. It'd either be in, probably in the Parks Department and Public Services. We've been working on environmental clearances. I have been working on environmental clearances, trying to pave the way for a potential project to extend the ramps. But we haven't provided any funding or set aside any funding for any construction. What's the other question?
The last one was, I'll read it again.
Levies?
Yes.
Levies,
Is there
yes.
anything in the budget for that? She don't see anything in the budget for that. Will it be budgeted next year once the feasibility studies alternatives are fully?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Supervisor Sabatier? And I'll close public input since that's the last question.
Yeah, my question is on your revenues. Just looking historically, in 2018-19, you were collecting about $800,000. Now, granted, I don't have the details that there was some transfers from other places, but it kind of $800,000, $740,000, $913,000, and then it just took a huge dip, and now it's at approximately 150,000 for your revenues.
Which budget unit, sir?
Oh, I'm so sorry, we're talking about all of them. 8107, Water Resources Admin. Like historically, it was much higher than what we're looking at least in the last 2 years, because even last year's estimate is in the negatives. So obviously, there was some transfers going on. Just kind of curious what changed.
Okay, do you have that? So, yeah.
I can.
That's a change in the accounting philosophies with admin. It's reflected as in an 80/80 charge. So instead of seeing it as a revenue, it's actually a reduction in expenses.
Correct. And you use that method when it's a 100% benefit to what's coming over.
And so that would be the 1.6 at the bottom?
Correct.
Gotcha.
In prior years, it would be it would have been up in revenues, which would.
And where are those revenues coming from, the 80/80?
Those should be from their other budget units.
Okay.
I say
Okay.
should be because I'm not 100% sure, but 99.
My hope was to maybe find some money, because I know that you and I have been having the conversation, and we'll continue to have the conversation, but I know that we're spending approximately $250,000, I believe, every single year for aquatic weeds, where there's the harvesting or the spraying, and we're not spending any money, maybe not any money, but we're spending very little money on the algae. We have historically attempted to fix the algae and deal with the algae. Unfortunately, nothing has shown to work. And in the history that you sent me, I believe it was somewhere around in the range of 400,000 or 500,000 since the 70s that we've spent trying to figure out the algae. And so over the course of the last 10 years, we've spent at least $2 million for our aquatic weeds, which typically impacts the upper arm of the lake. And the lower arms continue to have this struggle of dealing with the algae. And so I hope that we can find a solution, number one, because putting money into something that doesn't solve the solution is useless, but that we can also find a way to provide that respite to the southern arms, such as Clear Lake Oaks and Clear Lake, because that algae, especially during drought seasons, is pretty gnarly.
Yeah. Could I just make one comment, and I'm not, I'd like to offer that though the weed spray program at the north and west end of the lake, the direct benefit of that spray is certainly for boats and boaters coming in and out of ramps and whatnot at the west end of the lake. It has an indirect benefit for everyone, and that is by eliminating those aquatic weeds and reducing the amount of fragmentation that is occurring as boats chop the weeds up. Those weeds spread with the winds, and they spread all over the lake. And so I'd like to say there's an indirect benefit to the whole lake by reducing the weeds at the west end and reducing the boats chopping them up and yeah, it's not direct. You certainly don't see it like you do when you go out to the water here and after the weed spray and the weeds are gone. You don't see that, but again, I think there's an indirect benefit.
And not trying to take away, just looking for ways to make that possible down south.
And I don't disagree. Yeah.
All right,
And I think
so-
there's some things in our conversations that we've had, there's some really interesting technologies that I'm hopeful we can bring here and see if they'll work.
And there may be ways to get some grant funding for it too, so
Sure.
hopefully we can find the funding for it.
We have like 2 minutes for your next meeting and hard stop. So with that, there's not any more, what's that, Steve?
I've got to ask for one change before you guys approve real quick before the AVA meeting. So Budget Unit 1920, the Auditor's Office is going to lower their 8123, which is transfer into roads, the 1.4 million from the PG&E settlement. It needs to be adjusted in 3011 as well to bring it down from the amount that was already brought in last fiscal year. So 8122 for budget unit 3011 needs to go down by 423,927, so less revenue coming in because it was received last fiscal year.
Was this 343?
423,927.
423, not even close.
And then I assume, I'm looking over at Alicia, would be lower 5355 by that same amount, and then you can budget transfer around if that ends up being incorrect.
Yeah.
So 5355 would be lowered by the same amount.
Where's 5355? Oh, because you're giving us the code 8122, but which budget?
Oh, budget unit 3011.
3011.
Roads.
Gotcha.
And it's the 1.4 million PG&E grant that we were moving over from
And
the
that's
other.
basically the adjustment based on the actual cost. Now
That has already happened last year.
Yeah. Oh, I've driven on it. I've seen it.
That's it.
All right, so we're just looking for action.
Okay. I'm looking at Johanna. Do you want two different motions? Do them all at once?
Public Works.
Okay.
No, I said it's all Public Works.
It was an agreeance. So I move to approve budget units 1903, 1908, 3011, 3062 through
3011 as amended?
Oh, sorry, 3011 as amended with 8122, $423,927, 5355 at $423,927. 3062 through 3081, 3122, 3123, 8463, 8464 through 8472, 8483 through 8492, 9905, 9907, 9908, 9909, and 9911. Oh, I wanted to stop. And 162 through 1674, 1672 through 1674, 8101, 8104, 8105, 8107 through 8109.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are going to take a break for a half hour and come back after that break.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
All right, here we go.
I'm fine. Yeah, whatever you like.
There it is. All right.
That's why.
In business, there we go. All right, so it's 3:37. We're a little behind coming back at 3:30, but we are here. And our next budget item is, I'll just give it to Steve and let him.
All right, next up is County Library, Budget Unit 6022, found on page D253. And I'm not on that page, so I'll pass it over to the County Librarian, Christopher Veach.
Hello, thank you. So I'm Christopher Veach, the County Librarian. Thank you, Board of Supervisors, for considering this recommended budget and for the admin office for their work in putting this together. As Stephen said, it does begin on page D253 or page 297 of the PDF, if that's easier. So I have two budget units, 6022 and 6023, and they support the operations of the library, promote reading, literacy, and lifelong learning in Lake County. The main library fund, 125 Unit 6022, is primarily funded with a dedicated property tax approved by the voters in 1974. And those property taxes make up the majority of all revenues. But there are also various grants that fund specific programs, and I can get into that a little bit later. I did want to go over some of our accomplishments over the past year. So over this past year, use of the library has increased from the year before in all of the main metrics that we track. One of the main ones is circulation of library materials has increased both in print and in digital. And digital checkouts have grown substantially and now make up around 25% of our total circulation. So use of our public computers and Wi-Fi has also increased, and we now check out Wi-Fi hotspots and Chromebooks as well, and that's also been a popular item at the library. Also, attendance at our programs and events has almost tripled from the last year. So there's more people visiting our library branches in person and in some of our digital programs that we still do over Zoom. We've also been able to expand the amount of digital resources available to include resources for job seekers. And to help promote those resources, we partnered with CareerPoint, which is our local employment office here in Lake County. So this year also, I wanted to mention that we launched our Books by Mail program. And Books by Mail allows homebound residents to receive library materials for free through the U.S. Postal Service. This service is funded through a federal grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So in this future year, in this budget, we plan to continue to increase spending on our library collections. That will let us continue to provide digital resources as well as make further improvements on our print collection. We plan to increase access to the library in multiple ways through attending outreach events, by expanding digital access, and by exploring more physical service points. On expanding digital access, we plan to provide access to an online database of newspapers to include local newspapers and a mobile library app. We are also looking forward to working with the IT department on improving the library's portion of the county website. Already this year, with the help of the state library, we are now able to offer online live tutoring and homework help through Help Now for BrainFuse, aimed at K through 12 students. So the library has won many grants that will impact this budget year. And the largest is our Bookmobile grant, which will help us purchase our customized Sprinter van to serve as a bookmobile and outreach vehicle. And this vehicle should be here in 2023. We've also won a small grant to conduct a National Endowment for the Arts Big Read program, which will occur in the spring next year. That our literacy program is still funded by the California Library Literacy Services grant. Not reflected in this budget yet are grant funds awarded by the state through the Building Forward Library Infrastructure program. We just received word last week of the state library's intention to award our library. Our grant application was successful, and the intention is for us to be awarded over $1 million for capital improvements at our library branches. That will have to be incorporated in the future. My budget unit also includes budget unit 6023, Fund 71. This is a small fund entirely funded by community donations and helps support our library collection and events. The library will continue to partner with our community nonprofits, the Friends of the Library and the Lake County Literacy Coalition, who are the main source of community donations for the library. Thank you again, and that concludes my overview of the library budget, unless you have any questions or anything to add, Stephen?
Well, I was going to let the board go first.
Oh, okay.
Any questions from the board?
I just made a comment about the grant for the $1 million. That's incredible.
That's exactly where I'm going with it. It's $1,099,667 from, and then 500 and some odd thousand match. When is this going to possibly be approved? Because we probably should put it in now, unless nothing needs to happen before mid-year. I'd rather probably put it in now.
The only thing we've received from the state is the intent to award. So we haven't received any other information.
So mid-year it is.
So there's a 500,000 match? Is that what you said?
549,835, and I was planning on using the FBA, some of the FBA to cover that, because that is general fund.
Excellent.
I just wanted to mention it because it was in the news and people have commented on it.
these programs that are expanding are just really wonderful, Christopher. My family uses them a lot, and I know a lot of other families too, particularly the homeschool community. So I really applaud you on expanding these services. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the support that's allowed us to do that.
All right. So we'll open it up to the public. Anybody in Zoom that wants to speak on this item? Not seeing any hands, I'll bring it back to the board. Bless you. Oh, there.
No, he has a second budget unit.
Oh, okay. So we'll move on to the next one.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I think you did this.
Yeah, he talked about library improvements.
Yes, it did.
Quick question. I believe that you were hesitant or holding back from filling all your vacancies to ensure that there was cannabis funds that continued to flow, because I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you receive approximately, I don't know, 175,000, I think it's 194, but I might just be making that up, annually from cannabis for positions. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we do have unfunded positions. When we originally applied for the cannabis grant funds, that was before the salary increases. And so the cannabis funds that we were awarded didn't fully fund the positions. So those positions are unfunded.
And those, and actually, it looks to me like if you take away the unfunded, that you're 100% filled in your positions?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious, is it possible to drop it down to 2 positions, 1 position, so that you can get those filled?
If that's the preference that we eliminate unfunded positions, I can look at doing that in the future.
Because I'll be honest with you, if we approved cannabis for positions, then let's make it happen, or else if we're going to keep it unfunded, I'd rather use the cannabis funds for something else than have it just stuck where it can be used, but it's not being used. And so I'd love to figure out how to make it actually worthwhile where we get something out of it.
So I would encourage him to fund them again with the cannabis. The reason why they were actually unfunded is the first go-round, it was only for a 6-month period. That's what we approved, not realizing that, 6 months, there's a whole nother 6 months when it comes to ongoing. So he was sticking at the half price. And from what I'm hearing today, if the board is amenable to letting him fill those positions, because that helps out in the branches, the library branches. Does that work, Christopher?
I can look into doing that, yes.
And I'll just be sincere and frank. I did not know that we used cannabis taxes to cover those positions. That was in the Form 4 or Form 5, which we never got and never knew, and reviewed the videos, and it was never mentioned that that was the case. I want to support it because I don't want to just back out, but maybe since it was 3 unfunded positions, can we drop it to 2? And that way it kind of opens up for more educational opportunities for like First 5 or some other group to be able to utilize those funds? And I guess I shouldn't be looking at you, I should be looking at the rest of the board. Because it was a bit of a surprise when I found out, because I came from, I don't know if it was a conversation with First 5 or whoever it was, and said how many, and spoke with Mr. Carter and said, how much funds do we have left in our education allocation? And was very surprised that the majority of it was already being utilized. And I know that I usually stay apprised as to what we're doing with our cannabis taxes. Again, I reviewed the videos and it wasn't very explicitly stated, but it was found in the Form 5s and it was requested.
And that's back in the original canned grants as well.
Yeah.
So that is possible, up to your board.
I also want to make it clear, those cannabis funds, I do not believe, are being held for those unfunded positions because they are unfunded. So were we to drop down those unfunded positions, it wouldn't reduce the reliance we have right now on cannabis funds.
I think it is being held in an allocation with the idea that this is supposed to be covered by that.
It's held not in your budget unit, but in 1072 because it is technically possible.
Okay.
Now, granted, we have enough unallocated to do a lot of things, but that is being allocated. Because when you budget, you allocate for the max, not the minimum.
And so I guess just to kind of be clear, I'd love to have the conversation, do we unblock all three unfunded, or do we do two? But I think either way, we need to unblock something, or else money is just sitting there without a return on any of this investment.
I'm not really prepared to commit either way to that today. I would really want to look at what those positions could provide going forward and how it would impact our library system.
I think another part of this conversation is to be had after we get through the senior center project and figure out how that's going to be developed and if that outpost library is going to be there.
And I think we would need to have these conversations before, in between now and mid-year, and make it, whatever the final decision is, make it happen mid-year, which is very doable.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good then? All right.
Good, as long as we had that conversation so that we don't have something stuck.
All right. Mid-year. All right, so he did cover actually the other budget items, so I did open it up to the public, but I will again. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this? All right, bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve budget unit 6022 and 6023.
Second.
So I have a motion to end this.
Wait. Did we do something with, no, the $1 million?
That's going to be mid-year.
Okay.
Mid-year and
Everything is
mid-year.
It's not.
Push.
It's only notice of it.
Right.
Sure. Now I remember. Okay.
So we have a motion and a second.
So, okay, we have a motion and a second. So, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Christopher.
All right, next up is Agricultural Commissioner, Budget Unit 2601, found on page D 137, and I'm going slow so I can get there. With the projected budget of $1,162,962, and I'll turn it over to Department Head Catherine.
Great. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Crandall and Board. I would like to thank Stephen Carter for entertaining all my questions and Avella Cartero in my office for assisting with the budget. Catherine Vanderwall, Agricultural Commissioner, Sealer of Weights and Measures. So 2601 is the main budget for the Department of Agriculture and Weights and Measures. So in summary, my department is responsible for ensuring fairness and equity in the marketplace and protecting and promoting agriculture, the public, and the environment through the various programs that we administer. So the significant increase in Budget Unit 2601 this year is due to the capital asset listing to replace our 1982 International Weight Truck. Some of you have had the pleasure of seeing that. So the weight truck is a custom-built heavy-duty truck with a mounted crane, and it's used to test vehicle scales and other large capacity scales throughout the county. So our current truck, given its age, it lacks modernized safety features, and it currently cannot meet emission standards to be CARB compliant. So we are therefore restricted to the 1,000 miles per year. So some recent issues include mechanical failure of the truck, and Central Garage is not able to find parts to fix it. So we're just trying to keep it going right now. And because the weight truck is a custom item, it would have to go out, either for bid or through the RFP process. And it is something that might run into the next fiscal year before we actually receive it. Are there any questions for 2601?
Absolutely. What happens, is that the only equipment that you have for weights and measures for some of those large-scale things?
Yes, because it has a crane mounted on it, so the crane, we're able to move our 1,000-pound standards with the crane in the truck. And the truck itself serves as a standard.
Does it create a problem for the potential unexpected timeline that you might receive for when you start looking around for one of these?
To be honest, I don't know. We're just, the truck that we have right now is still in operation. So we're just kind of babying it along, and hopefully we can get a replacement before, it makes its final last drive.
Okay. For some reason, my first thought when you said it lacks the appropriate safety equipment, I'm like, did they have seatbelts in 1982?
It has seatbelts, but not much else.
Probably has manual windows too.
Yes, and no air conditioning.
That was my only question. I was worried about you not being able to fulfill the weights and measures part of your job if the vehicle dies and it takes a long time for us to be able to procure a new one.
Right, and that's why we want to start the process now,
Okay.
because it definitely might take a while to get a new truck.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
No? Okay. So I'll move on to Budget Unit 2701. So this is the Fish and Game Protection and Propagation Fund. So this budget unit supports projects that improve the habitat for wildlife and fisheries in the county and is funded by the state fish and wildlife fines, penalties, and forfeitures. So my department manages this budget for the Lake County Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee. So the committee receives project ideas from the community and then recommends approved projects to your board for approval, such as the ones that you approved in the previous fiscal year, which included the Clear Lake Bass Tournament and the Welcome Anglers signage that's been put up all around the county. So are there any questions for this budget unit?
No questions.
Okay. I'll move on to the last one. Budget Unit 2714 is the Biological Community Fund. So this budget unit funds the USDA Wildlife Services Program, which provides assistance to the public with nuisance wildlife. This program protects public health and safety, reduces livestock depredation, and mitigates property damage caused by wildlife. Any questions for this budget unit?
No, I'm not seeing any. No.
That's all I have.
You had some easy ones.
All right. I'm going to open it up for public input if there's anyone in the public that would like to comment on these budget items.
Actually, let me,
So I'll close public input and bring it back to the board.
hold on, I wanted to look at something real quick. I'm looking at your staffing. And I don't have it right in front of me. There we go. 5 out of 6. And is that the deputy that you're working on, or?
No, the deputy position has been filled.
Awesome.
So in doing so, it created a vacancy, which we were working on
Shit.
filling. Yes,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
All right. So with that, looking for action?
Do we do public comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I move to approve Budget Unit 2601, 2701, and 2714.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, Stephen.
All right, next up is Information Technology, Budget Unit 1904, found on page D59, with a requested appropriations of $2,310,717. And I'll turn it over to the IT Director, Shane French.
Thank you, sir. Well, good afternoon, Board. I am Shane French, Director of IT for the county. Wanted to talk to you quickly about some of the things that we did last year with funds that were allocated to the department. One of the things that we focused on was implementing some additional security systems for our critical systems, such as servers and critical endpoints. As I'm sure you know, cybersecurity is becoming a increasingly hot topic in our department, and we're trying to prevent any significant threat from getting at our network and causing harm to our systems or county data or to our employees or to the public. We actually were able to reduce costs last year for some of our backup systems. We send some redundant copies of backups securely to cloud services, and those costs were starting to creep up quite a bit last year, and we actually ended up reducing the cost greatly, so that was kind of a win there. We also began our website redesign and migration project. That kicked off last year, and we made some progress so far working with the vendor, Civic Plus, and they're currently in the design phase for that project. And then finally, we increased our ability to mitigate ransomware attacks if they are to happen. We're in a much better place than we were previously to deal with attacks like that, and those are just a constant threat. As far as upcoming, what the budget will be funding this year, of course, that same project, we're looking to finish up that website migration project. My hope is that will be finished up here late November, early December. That's kind of the slated date for that to be finished up. We're still working on implementing a document management system countywide that was piloted by the administrative office and human resources. But the intention here is that all departments will have access to that system, will be able to use it. That's a very exciting project to me, because it's going to allow for a lot of automation that we just haven't been able to pull off previously. It's a very, very cool system, very configurable, and has just a lot of opportunities for collaboration between departments. I'm really looking forward to departments leveraging that. We have also this year, we're looking at upgrading productivity tools such as Microsoft Office, something that hasn't been done in quite a long time. Talk about that a little more in a minute. And then, of course, as always, enhancing cybersecurity initiatives, looking to do some end-user security awareness training, as well as bring on some additional security services from vendors that will help us to avoid and mitigate any threats, because they just really are coming at us all the time now. I did want to kind of just talk about some major themes in our budget this year and in the coming years. I think, there's been a major change from capital expenditures to operational expenditures in our industry. Pretty much everything is going subscription-based. It used to be that we would purchase a physical asset, we would install it, it would serve us well for many years, we would maintain and operate it, and then we would replace it kind of forklift style after many years. That's just not something that is continuing to be available to us anymore. Really anymore, they want to sell it to you once and sell it to you again and make you subscribe for it. Cloud services, while they can be very powerful and very helpful, and certainly we leverage those cloud services where applicable, they tend to cost more than the old school buy it once and use it up for many years style of software and services. So, I'm always looking for opportunities to leverage the assets that we have, but it's becoming harder and harder to do that. And that's actually reflected in this year's budget. You're just going to see that those operational expenses, those services expenses are rising, I think, rapidly. And I just want your board to know that I'm doing everything I can to keep them from rising any more rapidly than they have to, but some of it's just unavoidable. Again, the cybersecurity spend is increasing as well. You'll see that in my budget reflected this year and last year and next year too. It's increasing all the time. The amount of services that you need to deploy to truly secure your network is just, it's increasing every year. And you can't just get by with the bare minimum anymore because the threats are just too advanced. As far as revenue, our revenue has been pretty strong for a number of years. It's been relatively stable. It does fluctuate from year to year depending on the demands of departments. But overall, it's pretty stable just by virtue of the way that we charge out the departments. And then as far as changes this year specifically, You'll see in here, there's an item for an increase again in licensing costs for, migrating to newer versions of the productivity suite. And again, that was done after an evaluation of purchasing a standalone license, and it's just not cost effective to do anymore. I mean, for example, Microsoft has raised the cost of that product almost by double, and they reduced the support timeline. So you can't just buy it and keep it forever because you're not going to get security updates and these kinds of things. They're making it to where it just doesn't make sense to do that. The other big theme in our budget this year is we've gotten a very significant allocation of ARPA funds to the tune of about $650,000 over 2 years. To give you an idea of some of the things that we're working on, again, cybersecurity, looking at advanced detection capabilities for threats coming in on endpoints and on edge devices. We've, of course, have that CMS website Civic Plus project where we're actually redesigning and migrating our website. Some of that is going to be covered by ARPA funds. Network infrastructure, the actual equipment that facilitates communications between departments. We're doing some replacements there of some aging systems, and those can be pretty expensive depending on what they are. And to kind of give you some details on that, some of that infrastructure will be replaced that services the Clear Lake and Lower Lake area, and others that services the Kelseyville area primarily. There'll be others, but those are the main ones. And with that, that's pretty much what I had for you, so if you have any questions.
Do you have a question?
I do want to mention one thing, and I need to look at your, what's your staffing situation right now, too?
Sure. So we have 7 out of 10 positions filled. We have 2 IS analyst positions that are not filled currently, and we have a deputy director position that is not filled currently.
Okay. And are you struggling to find people, or?
No, we've had a few recruitments here recently where we got pretty close to the finish line, and as things do during that process, sometimes for one reason or another, you can't bring the candidate all the way to completion. But I wouldn't say we're struggling. The other thing about it is in our department, there's quite a bit of training that has to happen. Even for folks that come in that have some experience, they need to be familiar with our systems and the way that things are done in our network. And, that can take some time. And it's kind of hard because we are so small, to train a whole bunch of new hires all at once. It just makes it more difficult because there's a lot of one-on-one work with the staff. So, no, I think we're in the right place there right now, yeah.
So how many buildings are you dealing with? Because, we talked with Director Ewing about the number of buildings that his staff work with. I'm guessing it's something similar, except for maybe like social services has their own thing for IT and things like that.
Yeah, so, certainly we support social services on a network level. There's about, my map of the network has about 50 locations. Now, not all of those have human beings in them. Some of them are relay sites and these kinds of things, but I think there's actually over 50 now, yeah.
Because I think that's an important thing to recognize within the budget, that it's not, we visually see it all the time here in the courthouse, but it's so much more than that. I have no specific questions about the budget. I know that we've invested in keeping our network secure. We've invested in the website, and I do want to thank you for your advocacy for making sure that we get our money's worth when it comes to working with our contractor for the website. I know I've been involved intimately with that conversation, and I just appreciate the fact that you are looking for what everyone else is looking to get to. So, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Open it up to the public for any comments on this budget item. All right, I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve Budget Unit 1904.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All right, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.
Stephen.
And, sorry about that. I'd like to potentially change up the schedule because we have 3 different departments that are not from this building and the next 2 off-site, not from, off-site. So if we can move down to animal control, animal care and control, budget unit 2703, found on page D 153.
The auditor controller has to stay with us anyway.
She does, and treasurer tax collector similar. I'll turn it over to Mr. Armas, the department head.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Jonathan Armas, the director of Lake County Animal Care and Control. To start with 2703, the Animal Care and Control Department. Just a quick overview. We respond to calls from for assistance from the public. We handle stray animals, aggressive dogs, injured animals, welfare checks, bites, that type of thing. Last calendar year, we responded to 1,150 calls, and we were able to take in 1,600 animals with an 81% live release rate. The big change from the previous fiscal year to this one is our salaries, which is largely from the class and comp study, but also we went from we reduced our 900 extra help employees by 10 positions and then increased our 3/4 full-time positions by 3. And I think it was around a $10,000 difference between keeping the cost of the 900 hour to the 3/4. Everything else is practically the same. And I don't think I have anything else in that budget unit. If there's any questions.
Was it earlier in the year that we added some positions?
We did the position allocation in July. On July 1st is when we made that change.
All right. It also, you said 1,100 calls, but here it says you nearly 2,500 calls for service, so you did a lot more. So it says here.
Uh-oh. On my, let's see.
You were just being humble, it's okay.
I ran those numbers yesterday, and
Okay.
I might have gotten my dates wrong on the system, but any other questions for 2703?
No.
Nope.
Okay.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
And then for 2711, it's the medical clinic. It largely assists our shelter. It's there to provide any medical care that animals require, which the animal control is required to provide. We also keep our adoption costs low because we're able to spay and neuter inside our own program. And then they do a community cat program, low-cost spay and neuter program, and vaccine clinics for the public. Our veterinarian passed away in March, as many of you know. We still have yet to find a replacement for that position. The honest answer to that is just we're nowhere competitive in pay anymore. There's a huge shortage for that type of career right now. We are still doing vaccine clinics and community cat surgeries, but the big change from last fiscal year is we had to put some money into specialized services. We do have a contract vet currently for 1 day a week, and we hope to find a vet.
Supervisor Spatier?
Yeah, I don't know how long we will have Dr. Sally to help out.
She's informed me that there will be an end, and it will probably be sometime within a year.
Ooh. My question for you is, I know that we contract with the city of Lakeport, and I know it's been a long time since we reviewed that. I'm really hoping that we can review that as I see your appropriations increase. I want to make sure that we're getting the same percentage increase from those that are contracting with us as well to make it fair for if we're seeing an increase in the level of need, especially with the salary increases, I think those need to be applied to any of the contracts that we have with others that we're providing the services in return.
So, because we kind of discussed that earlier this year, I have reviewed it. I have sent the numbers over to Chief Rasmussen and for his review, and I'm hoping to have all of that tied up by the end of this year.
Okay, thank you.
All right. No other questions? I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to comment on this item? Not seeing any hands up in Zoom, I will go ahead and bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve Budget Unit 2703 and 2711.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries.
Thank you.
JT.
Do you have your adoption event on Saturday?
Yep, we just set up. We have 4 dogs, 4 cats that are ready. We just went over to to that ranch, which is next to Rainbow Ag. They're all set up. It looks like it'll be a good event. We're excited.
Oh, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, next up will be probation, Budget Unit 2302, found on page D129. And their requested appropriations are $6,572,946. And I'll turn it over to the Chief Probation Officer, Rob Howe.
Good afternoon, Board. I guess it pays to come in person. I got upped a little bit. I'd like to start out with, as usual, a couple thank yous. Mainly that whole table over there, Ms. Parker and her staff, and Ms. Saderlin and her staff. More specifically, Stephen Carter, he's been my budget guru now for several years. Always a pleasure to work with, the communication and coordination, and they're very responsive, helpful. It's very appreciated. I've gone through some turnover in finance people, so their patience with my office deserves a thank you. So in probation, I'm going to skip our main overview of the department. I think you guys have read it before and know exactly what we do, but I would like to go into a few details and then maybe some accomplishments and some things we want to accomplish next year. So we are a general fund department. We do seek and rely pretty heavily on outside of general fund revenue. With numerous grants, state and federal funding, and with some contracts for our service, it puts us right around 40% general fund, so 60% of our revenue is outside of general fund. Not a lot of significant changes in our budget this year. Like most, if not all departments, the biggest significant expense was due to salary and benefit increases with the salary survey. We have been fortunate enough to get some new revenue coming in this year, always a good thing. SB 129 is the pretrial funding bill. That came about in, I think it was 21, and SB 823, juvenile justice reform, or realignment, basically the closure of DJJ. Both of those Senate bills came with some funding. Of course, they came with a lot of new responsibilities for that funding, but there is some money there.
That's ongoing revenue?
Yes. Well, assuming we jump through all the hoops that the state makes us, but yeah, we anticipate it being ongoing. The 129 funding, I'll get into that a little bit, but that's actually awarded to the courts. And then the courts have to contract with local probation departments to provide the services of pretrial. Now, the courts can agree to give us, I think the allocation is $200,000. They can kind of agree to give us whatever they want. Our courts are working really well with us, and it looks like they're probably going to give us the entire $200,000 annually. The expense comes with us, supervising the people. So, but yeah, it is ongoing. As far as some accomplishments from last year, we did return to in-person programming with a lot of our probation clients, mainly with a partnership with Woodland Community College. This was a great program we started over there. Not only allows us to do our programming in a classroom kind of environment, but it allows us to take advantage of college courses, college entry stuff for some of our clients. We also increased our clients' ability to work online by loaning out equipment, essentially laptops, so they could do Zoom meetings and things like that. Of course, those things were all determined or made possible or made necessary with COVID, and now that we're getting out of that, we are returning, as I said, to some in-person stuff, but we found a lot of value in the things we were doing. With this huge lake in the middle of our county, transportation's always been difficult, so the more programming and classes and meetings that we can do through technology, we're going to keep doing that. We did also put our devices out in our local peer support centers. We have one in Clear Lake Oaks, and Lakeport, I believe. We also partnered with the Office of Education to reintroduce our family wrap program. That's something I believe I've spoken to the board about. We lost that through some funding a few years ago, and it was good to get that back. About a third of our juvenile population takes advantage of that program. It's a program that, as you know, helps prevent the kids from getting into the system, those at high risk. Let's see. We partnered with Lake County Superior Court to implement a pretrial services program. And by partnered, I think we're required. We're kind of made to do this. As the board, I'm sure, is aware.
Forced friendship.
Yeah, well, we've been doing it since the Humphrey Court case, which basically said bail can't be denied based on cash alone kind of thing. And that changed the rules a lot, started a lot of legislation and a lot of bail reform. That was back in, the case was actually 2017, but didn't really start taking effect until 2020. In 2021 was when SB 129 came into effect, and that was when the courts got the funding. So I say we partnered, but we're doing that, and I'll speak a little bit more about that program. It's one of the concerns we have going forward, but I'll talk about it later. We collaborated with community partners, including Behavioral Health, the Hope Center, Elijah House, Adventist Health, Lake County Office of Education, Lake County Department of Social Services, North Coast Opportunities, and Pastor Shannon to continue a housing navigators program. This assists our probationers in finding housing after incarceration. Last year, the group was able to assist 55 clients, and they're looking at trying to improve upon that this year with rental assistance, SLAs, Hope Center, all those kind of different service providers. We also last year partnered with Kelseyville Unified School District to place school resource officer there. I think I brought that before the board. We have that position and we have more, and I'll talk about that a little bit. I like the SRO program. So moving into some goals, we plan to partner with Mendocino College, much like we did Woodland, to do the on-campus courses this year. We're in talks and should have an MOU shortly with them. Again, the benefits are we can provide all of our training in classes like MRT and job readiness, anger management, all those kind of things, in addition to the college entrance process assistance. I'm not going to talk about our case management system right now. We intend to implement an auto alert system to ensure that those on pretrial supervision, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is pretrial, we're doing a lot with that, but to ensure that they actually attend hearings. This is the function that I think we're going to be able to fix with our caseload management system, but we're doing it in person right now, our clerical staff. It's basically calling people to make sure they show up for court because bail is really not a common thing anymore. Let's see, to kind of wrap it up, the challenges I see going forward for probation, first is staffing, and I know you hear it, we all talk about it. I've heard Sheriff Martin discuss it earlier, and I agree with a lot of what he says. I think it's, especially in the law enforcement world, it's not Lake County, it's statewide, it's in fact nationwide. I think it's cultural, generational, there are a lot of issues and no easy answers to that. But I think the board has made some good choices, some big steps toward improving it with the salary increases and the hiring bonuses, those kind of things. I think we're heading in the right direction. I'm always an optimist with that. I think, especially in the law enforcement world, there's a pendulum. You know, you can be popular to be anti-law enforcement for a while until people figure out that doesn't usually really work and it goes back the other way. And I think we'll get there. So again, I'm optimistic. I think those decisions made by the board and admin are going to pay off. To talk a little bit about our department, our vacancy rate's about 20% department-wide, but we've had some positive things happening. In 2022, so far this year, we've hired 3 deputy probation officers, 6 in the past 12 years, or excuse me, 12 months, 12 years. That's probably not that far off, but 12 months. We currently have 4 in background and 3 that have passed background and are waiting for medical. And I think that's a really good sign that some of the new steps and new procedures are working. That of course also shows that there's been turnover in the past, that we have that many to hire, but it's a positive thing. And I think moving forward, I think we're going to be okay. The other challenge going forward, and I mentioned it a few times, is pretrial programs. This is, so departments throughout the state, they're basically having to create pretrial agencies or divisions within their own departments. And a small department like ours, if you can imagine trying to create a new division with hiring being like it is, it's very difficult to do things that just a few years ago we didn't have to do. When I say that we're doing things we didn't have to do with pretrial, we're now supervising, providing classes, programs, assessments, we're testing people. And all these people have not been committed of crimes, they're not on probation, and prior to bail reform, they would have either been in custody or on bail. So far this year, last year is kind of the first full year we were doing pretrial on an informal basis without the funding of SB 129. And we got 21 people referred all of last year for that kind of, for pretrial services, which isn't that big, but this year so far, in the first 3 months of this fiscal year, we've got 28. That doesn't sound like a huge number, but it shows you how quickly it's growing. And again, those are all in addition to what we've already, this is new stuff. These are normally people we wouldn't see that we'll be dealing with now and for the foreseeable future. Again, the board, admin, you've been really good to us in the past couple of years. Our allocations, I think, are sufficient. Our hiring, we're seeing some progress. So as we hire, I think we'll be okay there too. And that's really all I have, except for questions that maybe I can answer.
And you're loaning staff to the jail?
Kind of, yeah. We, the deal is we have assigned probation officers there, their workstation is there. You know, as Sheriff Martin as I'm sure, been here for a few of his presentations, legally he has to have a female there on campus, so to speak. We're providing that. We're fortunate enough to have several employees in our department who are qualified, who have the STC core course for corrections. So not only is it a female as required by law, but it's someone who's actually qualified to be there if they do need to help. But primarily, that's their workstation. They're doing probation work and assisting as needed with the sheriff's office. And I did hear that, the presentation, and I appreciate you, Supervisor Spate, for being concerned with my department and how many are going to leave. And of course, that came to mind to me too, and it's a little bit of a concern, but with this, you know, they need help, we can help. As far as what happens with how many people, if any, we lose, I will say that most of the people we have them because they came from that. So I'd like to think they're going to stay, but appreciate that concern.
Just keep bringing the donuts in the morning and
Do something, all right?
Supervisor Sabatier?
So I do have a question. One is more just how things are affecting you with the new bail reform. What is your view of that? Is it working? Are you able to get people to court? Are you seeing a higher percentage of people skipping out on court?
Well, asking me if it's effective, that's getting into a real big political conversation. Obviously, bail reform is questionable throughout the nation, and you read in the papers all the time about people who are out that maybe would have been on bail or incarcerated committing crimes, and that's going to happen. With us, the impact is just staffing. Again, we're doing very, very much the same thing we would do with a probationer, except these people, of course, aren't on probation. So, and it's all with what the court orders. Sometimes they order full supervision and testing. Sometimes they just want a weekly check-in. So it really depends. As long as our staffing holds out, and again, I'm optimistic, it's really not, it's not that much of a hardship for us. When SB 10, if you recall, was first coming around, that was calling for a whole bunch of other stuff that would have been problematic. Basically, we would have had to do assessments on everybody arrested. And reports.
24 hours.
Yeah, reports completed into the courts within 24 hours. That was going to essentially make us into a 24/7 operation, which is a big change for us. Fortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Our courts work with us really well. Again, we're handling maybe 28 at a time. Some of those could be pretty long-term. That is going to increase over the years, I'd imagine, but with the funding from SB 129 and the position allocations, I think we'll be fine.
Okay. I'm very interested in looking at the long term, just to see who does show up to court. Is it the same percentage as before, where before the bail bondsman would be able to go after them if they didn't show up to court? But here, it's, like you said,
Yeah.
you're making a phone call. How effective is that leverage in comparison? So I don't think we'll know right away, but I'm very interested in knowing.
I'm interested too, and our leverage, as kind of explained, will really depend on what a judge orders. Because a judge may just order, we call them, and they're probably not going to show up because they wouldn't have showed up before. But there are those with electronic monitoring and full supervision where we have a little more teeth, so to speak, to get them to show up.
Right. And I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but I know that historically, so your revenues seem pretty normal as far as the growth, but the final recommended in your expenditures is quite a large jump. In 2021, your actuals was 4.2, estimating last year of 4.6, and here we're doing a final recommendation of 6.6 almost. Just kind of curious where the extra is going, because it definitely, there's a 500 or so just in the, maybe even more, 600 or so in the salaries, 700. But just wondering if there's anything other than salaries that's pushing that up.
Well, I'll look over to Stephen for help with some line-by-line things other than salary and benefits. I didn't notice anything huge.
Because I just didn't see a 2 million increase just within the salaries. At least it didn't jump out at me like that. But when I looked at the bottom and made that comparison, that 2 million is quite a large change. And maybe it's just a whole bunch of numbers, and eventually there's enough of a difference to add up to that, and I'm just not seeing it.
I will say a good chunk of it is salaries because he's had multiple vacancies and it sounds like he's hiring them. But I'm also going down the list. It looks like it's a whole lot of here and there's.
A lot of little
there are
things, yeah.
plenty of insignificant ones, but yeah, most of it's salary. Ours was huge, and we are anticipating being a whole lot closer to fully staffed this year than we've been in the past with our, well, like I said, with everybody in background, hopefully passing.
And the other large one is support and care of persons, which is for your child, I believe, right, your 4E.
That could, we were spending, and the board approved this contract with Tehama for an additional $100,000 to go towards a partnership with Tehama County to develop the programming necessary to, I've spoken a little bit about SB 823, juvenile justice realignment. Again, essentially for that, that's just the closure of DJJ. So any youth that would have been sentenced there in the past is our responsibility now. Of course, since we contract out for those services, we have to have an option. We're fortunate that we don't have anybody sentenced to that. What DJJ is and was CYA before that. The kind of the worst of the worst for juveniles, very violent, sex offenders, heavy mental health issues, that kind of stuff that frankly most facilities aren't capable of handling. So that 100,000 went, again, with approval of the board in that contract towards establishing that ability to handle that for the future.
And I will
5402 is a jump too.
64.
5402, corrections.
The statistic that jumps out at me, and I think it kind of relates to the conversation we had yesterday about the rec facilities and the pool facility, is your 100 juveniles that you're currently tracking and seeing and on probation, and that is a huge number. And I hope that things like the conversation yesterday can impact to keep them out of those types of situations.
And again, that was actually in the overview was written back in preparation. That's decreased actually quite a bit. I'll get the exact number for you, but, and it's likely to increase significantly in some new legislation that wants to reduce juvenile probation terms to 6 months. Looks like that's going to get signed. A lot of entities, CPOC, chief probation officers oppose that. I mean, most of the programs, like sex offender programs, are a year. How do you do that if they're only on probation for 6 months? But
And this is the chance to rehab while they're still young, too.
Yeah.
So,
But
thank you.
don't have a lot of control over that one.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll open it up to public input for any questions on this budget item.
No questions.
What's that?
That was muting.
Oh, okay. All right, not seeing any hands, I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve Budget Unit 2302 as presented.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you all.
And then, Steve, go ahead.
So at this time, I just want to ask the board if they wish to go beyond 5 o'clock, because we have Department of Social Services, and it would be it seems like it would be a natural end to the day, and we can come back fresh tomorrow, but of course, it's up to your board. And that way, I can also notify the departments who are waiting to be called forward to let them know that they can come back tomorrow morning.
I'd be good to go through social services myself. I think
Yep.
that would be a good way to end it.
And
Yep.
I don't want to stay here much longer than necessary for staff's sake. They've had a full day as well, and we need to make sure to give them that rest. Sorry.
All right, so with that, it looks like we have a consensus
Thank you,
to
sir.
do that. And so what we'll do is I'll let Stephen invite social
All
services.
right, last one of the day, Social Services Administration, Budget Unit 5011, found on page D229, and their requested appropriations equal $34,636,457. And I'll turn it over to Department Head, Mrs. Marketan.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm Crystal Marketan, Director for the Department of Social Services, Executive Director for Area Agency on Aging for Lake and Mendocino County, and Executive Director for our housing program. And with me today is Mickey Dolby, our Administrative Deputy Director. And I just want to add a big thank you to Mickey. This will be her last budget. She is retiring, and I'm really sad, but good for her. She does a lot there, and I just so appreciate her. Okay, so I'm also very happy to be able to go on today. It's just a thank you for indulging us here. So I just wanted to make a couple of comments before we get into the actual budget units. So as you know, Social Services is primarily funded through state and federal dollars. Our final recommended budget is a total of $65,468,137, with a total of 10 budgets. The combined budgets are an increase fiscal year 21-22 in the amount, or over fiscal year 21-22 in the amount of $4,509,000, primarily based on the increase to salaries, which totaled $3,238,760. We do have, when fully staffed, 274 positions at the department. Right now, we are between around 20%, 21% vacant, back and forth a little bit. The county general fund contributions to this year's budget total $152,141. And those include $70,648 to Budget Unit 5168, which are the senior programs. This covers the county's match per the Joint Powers Agreement with Mendocino County for the Area Agency on Aging and a portion of the funds supporting senior services through the county. Additionally, the county agreed to contribute this year $81,493 from the general fund to pay for an analyst position for housing and urban development programs delivered through the department, which includes Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher and also emergency housing vouchers, which are relatively new, and we continue to operate that program through the COC. These programs are administratively underfunded, as they are typically part of a diversified housing authority where income derives from a variety of sources, including housing development. And so the HUD subsidy we receive for operating these programs is inadequate, essentially. It's unusual for them to be, sitting alone as they are. The bulk of our budget is derived from funding generated through continuous time studying to state and federal funding sources. As has been mentioned before, our department, as with other state and county government organizations, has struggled with filling a number of vacant positions. At the present time, we have 21% vacancy rate despite dedicating 3 full-time staff to recruitment, retention, and staff support within our office and funding a full-time position at county HR. Our program management staff also meet regularly to develop and implement new recruitment and retention strategies. Some of those are based off of a workshop that the sheriff had with his recruitment or recruiter expert. And we do believe that we're moving forward, but it's slow, and the hiring process itself takes time. So these changes have, they're coming slowly, and we continue to have some turnover. Our program management staff also meet regularly to develop and implement new recruitment and retention strategies for the department, including the implementation of some of the incentives that have been made available through the county, including hiring incentives and the referral incentive if you know someone else who follows through with applying. You'll notice that we have not removed our vacant positions from our budget. And I just wanted to explain that just to ensure that everyone understands our strategy. Our vacancy rate will, over time, impact our ability to keep these positions in our budget as fewer hours are studied to. But at the present time, we are well positioned to fill all vacancies should eligible candidates apply. And the way that our funding works is that our employees continuously time study. So those are to state and federal programs, and that is how we draw down our funding. And so without those staff, we're not drawing down that same level of funding. So vacancies really are do over time negatively impact our overall budget because we're not time studying those hours. And so for us, because of past time studies, the number of staff that we have right now really reflect the amount of work that is done at the department and needs to continue to be done. But right now we have staff who are covering, and we're meeting our mandates, but it's clearly not ideal. We do need to refill those positions. And so I have elected not to cut those positions at this time. It actually would just simply happen over time if we fail to fill those positions. And let's see, where did I write down? Oh, so we have 274 full-time positions, and right now we're probably closer to 220. And you can imagine the workload difference there. They feel it. And so we're throwing everything at this effort to get people hired and get them to stay. So DSS does continue to meet our mandates, and in the long term, a reduced staffing level will negatively impact our ability to meet the needs of the public that we serve. So it is imperative that we move forward and get this done. And, I feel similar to Probation Chief Howe in that I think right now is just really an unusual time. This is not unique to Lake County. At California Welfare Directors Association, we regularly talk about our difficulties in hiring, and it's definitely statewide. Some a little more, some a little less, but in some counties. But for the small counties, it is across the board. And I think the only way, to solve this is just to move through it and continue to put the resources towards it that we are doing right now. Highlights over the last fiscal year include qualification of 51%, which equals around 34,814 people of our population for Medi-Cal benefits. We issued $3.5 million of CalFresh benefits to more than 13,000 residents. Recruited and approved an additional 16 family resource homes within the county, bringing the total to 43. If you remember when I got here, we had almost no local families for foster homes, resource families. So that is just really shows the dedication of that staff, and also I think the community working with us to refer people and generate some interest around that, because it is so much better for reunification services for children to be placed in county that can stay in their local schools, And then they also have access to visitation and other supportive services through the department so much more easily than when they are placed outside the county. And we're also saving a lot of social work time that way because we had people in their cars constantly, going to pick kids up, bring them, to facilitate the whole visitation thing. And so I'm just really proud of that number and of the staff that made it happen. So I just want to make sure and give them a shout out here. Through targeted efforts, we have also increased relative placement, which is another very positive thing. So those, are relatives who are coming in and becoming approved. Reduced the number of children in out-of-home placements from 109 to 74 through pre-placement prevention services, another really great statistic. Issued $6.5 million over the year in CalWORKS benefits, serving an average of 450 families a month. And then we also issued $600,000 in supportive services benefits over the last year, covering childcare, transportation assistance, family stabilization, and other ancillary services. One thing I would add there is that employment services, those programs that are run through employment services, a lot of that has been deferred over COVID. And so that is now coming back. And I really, staff is looking forward to that. And I hope that, the population who can make use of those programs, will see them coming back in. Then, what else? We supported 2,100 IHSS recipients through the, and then also we have 1,800 registered providers for IHSS. So, this does not change. This is a huge program in Lake County and will likely, continue to be based on our demographic, the high number of both disabled and seniors in the community. And we successfully migrated to the new statewide CalSAWS, so statewide automated welfare system. Eligibility system through the dedicated effort of our incredible management and support staff. It was a huge move. There were 3 systems in the state of California, and they're all going to the single CalSAWS finally. And there still is one group that will be migrating, but very soon we'll have just one statewide system. So goals for our next fiscal year include the department will continue to lead the mass care and shelter efforts during disaster preparation and obviously sheltering activities. Continue to maximize existing funding sources and pursue future funding sources for new programs to continue to serve the residents of Lake County. We are always looking for ways to maximize efficiency, support and grow current and new programs for the benefit of our community. And we do regularly have meetings around this and how, to make programs more efficient. Pursue, Lucy already said that. And then we also would like to continue with permanent remote work and flexible schedules for a certain segment of our staff. It doesn't work in all positions, but for our eligibility staff, it is, has been extremely successful. And there doesn't appear to be a real need for them to be on site. It's the one program that I can say, it really does seem to help us both with recruitment and retention. And related to that, they sit at Anderson Ranch, or they did prior to COVID, which really has left a huge vacant room at Anderson Ranch. And so moving forward, we will be taking to the Space Committee some plans to decrease our leased properties. So there's a couple of buildings that we likely could integrate into the building at Anderson Ranch where the eligibility workers have sat in the past. So you can look for us to be recommending that and bringing that forward here in the near future. One of the reasons that I haven't done it yet, well, I think we're still in a little bit of flux, but it's also, it hasn't been very clear as to whether the board would support a permanent remote work outside of the pandemic. And so, once we have some clarification around all of those things, I think there's some real cost savings to be had. And also, I think it does go to retention of staff as well. Yeah. Then, the other part of that plan would include some shared workspaces. So it's basically, I'm sure you've all heard the term hoteling. So people would be coming in and they would have a place to come in, if they needed to come in for a specific reason and plug in their computer and work from the office. And so that's just another element of that same plan. And then we have also are contracting with the company. We're piggybacking on the county's contract to digitize the bulk of our records. And so we're in the middle of that process and talking with them about, we have such a variety of document types and also automated systems. And so some programs need it more than others, where there's a lot of paper documents that will need to get scanned in and saved. And every program has a different retention rule also. So it's a job, but I really think, we need to get this done, and it's a great opportunity to have someone already selected to do that work, and they've been very helpful to us in, developing a plan for social services. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that more in the coming year. And finally, we just are always looking for ways to pursue different technologies that will help support our staff. And this does include, even switching systems. Like right now, for example, we do have a really antiquated accounting system. And so we are looking for a replacement with that will be compatible with the county system. And hopefully, we'll find that magic fit there, because you really have to make sure that it works for the county. And we have had a lot of support from the auditor's office in terms of identifying what that would look like. So we're moving forward with that, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. And I have Nikki here to kind of go over each budget unit quickly and answer any questions that you may have.
Pull this over here. Hello. Thank you for letting us present this afternoon. I know you've had a very long day. I don't know how much detail you would like me to go into, or if you even need me to go over each one of these budget units. I know you have them all in front of you. You can look at each one, but if it would be helpful. No? What we do, I'm just going to... That was Stephen. We have 10 budget units that total approximately $65 million. Our largest one is the 5011 budget unit, which is our administration budget for social services, and that is our largest one. I think Stephen said 35 million and some odd change. The others are supporting budgets and also specialized budgets. If you would like me to discuss each one, or if you have specific questions about any one of them, I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability.
So, Stephen, Mr. Carter, I know that you brought up that we have this new found money because of the Teeter Fund that just deposited some money that is not necessarily within the budget that we're looking at right now, correct?
It is not, no.
Okay. You said that
They're self-funded.
You said that can quickly disappear. I don't know if you already have items that are dedicated to that, but I do know that I've had a couple phone calls in the past for help with adult protective services. And that budget, in my opinion, is woefully low. I'm going to say what I think I remember I heard, that it was like 10,000, or it was a pretty low budget of what's available after the rest of the overhead stuff is gone. We have a large senior community, and I'd love to, I'm not looking for like 100,000 or 200,000, but if it's as low as what I just said, if we can increase that to be more capable when we have seniors who fall through the cracks, that we receive phone calls and we're only able to say, sorry, we're already out of resources for you, I would love to see that increase.
I'm going to let Mickey and Crystal answer that one because they have ability to do that internally.
So I'll just give you a quick response here. So this year, actually, at the legislative level, Adult Protective Services was expanded. Traditionally, that is money that the county has, that we, social services, have decided to set aside, and that's why it's always been woefully low, because there is actually no state funds to do any of that work. It's completely different than child welfare. I think a lot of people are very used to child welfare having a budget to be able to provide services and supports to children and family that they're serving. And Adult Protective Services has had nothing, literally, no money put aside for that. So with Adult Protective Service expansion, the age for eligible Adult Protective Services reports is now 60 instead of 65. That was a big change. And then there has been more funding put towards Adult Protective Services, and I would expect that to continue. Yes, we at the department can fund things when, we can take from our money to make things available, but if you're doing any kind of like an ongoing fix for people, it's usually not a one-time only thing. And as you mentioned, it's a huge it's over 30% in this county. And so, and it also applies to the disabled. And so, we look forward to doing more, and we are, in fact, our staff actually participated in a video to explain Adult Protective Service expansion. With the state of California, and I think that you'll be seeing a lot of changes in the future, and we can come to the board and do a presentation on that. It's really slowly unfolding, but this is an huge aging population in the state of California, and I think this governor has made it somewhat of a priority to expand services in that area. Well, and the legislature, obviously. But, always, if there's a specific situation, that people are aware of, they can call either the Adult Protective Services. We have a manager there who's relatively new, and she's excellent, Amy Shemansky. And, it's not for lack of wanting to do that for, our clients that we serve. It's just always been an unfunded part of that program. And so once we have more information, we will come and do a presentation to let the community know really what direction it's headed in, and also the change in the reporting laws.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know I've referred a couple to you in the past year, so.
I can also add to that is what the manager over Adult Services felt was the best way to handle these expansion funds for the Adult Protective Service, which is just a small part of our adult services. They chose to put staff toward it, so they would have more quicker response to any calls, any needs that they would have there. So they wanted to put a supervisor over Adult Protective Services to be able to provide more service. So that was what we added to the budget this year.
Okay. Thank you.
What's that? Oh, yeah, we also have a program called Home Safe that we receive funding for. That's going to be a new program that they're implementing this year.
So that is a program we just recently opted into, and it's not a lot of money. I think it's around $200,000, but basically what it is meant for are those folks who have a place to live, and there are things that need to be repaired or, something safer about the home. And so, that's kind of exciting because this is really the first flexible money that we have had, through the state for that senior population.
Okay. My last question is IHSS. With the new laws that just came into play, I know we haven't seen the minimum wage increase, but in a very indirect way we did. Does this budget prepare us for any kind of change? Or just what we've agreed on?
We negotiated with the union last fiscal year, and it covers the increase to the minimum wage. So we have agreed to pay a certain portion, which is our IHSS MOE. And this year in our budgets, it's a bit over $7 million for the year.
And my concern is the $22 an hour for fast food workers, which it's not a minimum wage increase, but it will absolutely impact every minimum wage or those that are close to minimum wage, and that's just what I'm worried about. So I thought
Even for our own staff.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. If there's no other questions, is there another budget item we need to go through, or can I open it up for public input?
All 10 of those budgets, I just lumped into one big
I have
blurb.
I have a hand up from the public. Betsy Kahn, if you'd like to unmute and state your name for the record, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mrs. Dolby and Mrs. Marketan. My concern is about the emergency management services for older adults and disabled persons, the use of senior centers as designated disaster centers that was called for in the current Community Wildfire Protection Plan, those aspects of managing services for older adults, caregivers, and disabled family members. I didn't see anything or hear anything mentioned in your budget report. So even though the capacity would be, the ability to add capacity might be coming from a Department of Homeland Security funding through the Office of the Emergency Services or something else, I'd still like to know if you recognize the need for that level of assistance and have considered that in how you allocate your funding. Thank you.
You want us to respond to the question?
Yeah.
Okay. There's no allocated funds for emergency services for us, so we don't set aside or create any part of the budget that covers that. We are mandated to be disaster service workers, and we follow those guidelines, and we make that work within our budget, waiting for FEMA funds and things like that. But we really don't have any allocated funds for emergency
It's a
services.
reimbursement thing.
Well, even in a reimbursement thing, through FEMA would be our only way of getting
That's what I'm
reimbursed.
saying.
Yeah,
Which takes time for us to finalize everything in order to give
Exactly.
you the final reimbursement.
yeah, there's a lot of hoops to jump through for that. So there has been discussions,
I don't know why it takes so long.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. It is happening, though, and it's pretty thrilling to see, and I'd like to thank our auditor for that. It's just, it is. It's a morass of paperwork when you have the number of staff that we have responding to disasters like that. And it's not like we're out on the fire line, but, we turn in that paperwork, but it's a huge, laborious process that the auditor's office then has to go through to submit to FEMA and, turn that money around and then to re-justify it to return to us. And so we have received some funds, and it's pretty exciting to see that. But back to Ms. Kahn's concern, and I know this is a big concern considering the size of our senior population, but we really do not, we really have very relatively small funding for the senior population as a whole, and none that is directed towards, specific to disaster response. That does not mean that through the Area Agency on Aging and then through Adult Services that we're regularly talking to people about developing their evacuation plan, learning the code of their area for evacuation, and really understanding that we do not have staff that can assist in evacuation, as we are not first responders. And so we will be there for them at a shelter, and will help them, at that level. But beyond that, it really is outside of the scope of the Department of Social Services.
And we just had 2 of your staff members who have been absolutely a part of the evacuation center setup, received their awards yesterday. And so I know that they've got the experience and they're learning more in order to be able to do better, unfortunately, for the things we know we'll need in the future.
Yeah, it's not for lack of wanting to do this, and I know that. I think that's understood, and it is inadequate. And 2 things happened over this last fiscal years, or no, the last 2 fiscal years, is the California Department of Social Services created a CDSS disaster services branch at the state level, but did not pass any administrative funding for a similar workers to provide those services ongoing at the county level. And that's, we actually, this 20 small counties, we proposed some legislation that was taken forward by CWDA last year to give us funding for continuous disaster responders. In large counties, they have a disaster services sitting within social services, but obviously in this county, we're in a different financial situation. And so we're asking that the state make that funding available because it's, we're the program people are the same people who are doing your disaster response. And then the other thing that CDSS implemented at the state level was a housing department. And likewise, no administrative funding at the county level to apply for those grants or to follow through and implement. And we did get the Home Key Award. It was not this year, but the last fiscal year, in partnership with Adventist. But I likely will not apply for more funding because we don't have the administrative staff to support, whatever, the project would look like. And so, hopefully there will be some funding for staff in the future and we can make better use of those 2 programs that were developed at the state level.
All right. I don't see any other public comments, so I'll bring it back to the board and we'll go from there for action.
Just want to follow up on that last statement there. If there's anything we could do as a board of putting a letter together of support and looking to do that, please bring that to us, and we'd be willing to do that, obviously, because both those things you just talked about are critical for us here in Lake County. So
They are.
if there's any opportunity to bring it up to CSAC, RCRC, continue to push that and see if we can get any movement on that.
Thank you. I will do that.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go for it. All right, Mr. Chair, I move to approve budget units 5011, 5012, 5121, 5125, 5164, 5165, 5168, 5169, 5281, and 5282.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank
And
you.
thank you for letting us sneak in here today.
And enjoy your retirement.
with that, looks like we're going to come to a halt here and recess till tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. And continue on with Stephen. We'll just figure it out.
We will begin with the auditor's office. Then we will follow up with the treasurer, tax collector, and then we will begin on the schedule with jail medical services. And all the way
All
down.
the way down from there. Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow morning. We'll go to a recess.